Testing, testing. I'm calling the September 26, 2018 meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hudson is excused. Commissioner Donenfeld?
Present.
Hirschbein?
Present.
Maruzzi?
Here.
Woods?
Here.
Vice Chair Callardine?
Here.
And Chair Wormick?
Present.
6 members present. We have a quorum.
Can we have a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, September 20th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
And can I have an acceptance of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. That passes. There is no consent calendar. Well, we are going into public comments. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar and other agenda items and items of general interest within the purview of the Commission. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking actions on items not listed in the posted agenda. 3 minutes is allowed for each member of the public to testify. People who are here testifying on items 1A and items 4A should speak now. Items 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, and 2E are also public hearing items, so you may choose to speak now or choose to speak during the public hearing on those items. Are there any members of the public who wish to come forward?
Merkins, Palm Springs resident, and I'm going to be talking on, so I can get off to another meeting, 2C mostly, but in regards to 2D and 2E, I am against an extension there, just so that's we need to rein in our thought process a little. And some of these things extending, we just have too much going on. And one of those projects is right across from the Cameron Davidson project that is still being worked on for over 10 years plus now and has kind of sunk. So we need to really stop and look at what's going on overall regarding extending. Regarding 2C, first of all, this address that is on here is not on the suspension list that is on the Vacation Rental Compliance Department website. So it's missing from there. I looked up some information on it. The 3 citations were for September 17th, March, and May 2018, 2 for music, 1 for advertising. I'm saying revoke the land use permit on this, and going forward, we have one other suspended STR that I can find, and that is the very first one actually on the website. It's a 5-bedroom, and it was suspended on July 2017. It doesn't come back up until July 2019. So here we already have one that has been sitting for over a year and this new one that's coming up. So in regards to that, the 2-year suspension should set a message that there was an issue with the property and also the surrounding areas. And we want to look at clustering and density. And if some changes come along from the city and the ordinance or what's going on, adding different structure in there, I don't think we should be grandfathering in land use permits just like they're giving them out, and once you get it forever. So there's the clustering and density issue, the suspension issue, the tracking of the permits. I just mentioned that this one is not even on the Vacation Rental Compliance website as suspended. So we already have a tracking issue. So you guys shouldn't have to track, and the city shouldn't have to track what was already suspended. And also, if it's revoked, it should just be a new process. The knowledge of not having caps in place also should be a concern. That goes back to clustering and density around land use permits. And then we just had an issue happen in the Administration Board of Appeals regarding a property on South Arby that was marketing itself as a 5-bedroom, even though the Riverside County listed as a 4-bedroom. So we can't even reel in and track this properly as to what's out there already. So the land use permit is very much in need, but we need to be able to come back to tracking again. And there's 2 areas right there I just mentioned on tracking. I was going to say, so back to just the closing on this, the site has.
Is there another member of the public who wishes to speak? Please come forward. You can step forward. The mic is on.
And I'm glad to see it's getting off the ground finally. This amount of houses stretches our fantastic fire department a little thin, and I would hope that the Planning Commission would see before the final track map is set up that there is space in there for a new firehouse. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mary Petrilli, and I'd just like to ask a question. Are we on 2E at this time?
You can speak on 2E.
Okay, I would like to speak on 2E. The last time I spoke to a member of this committee, the last time I spoke to a member of this committee, who I don't see here, this is a planning commission, a member of the city council, I was informed that the Serena Park project was asked to produce $3 million for a continuation of this project. I would like to ask this board if that money has been appropriated by Serena Park as required by the city council. That's my first question. Can anyone on the board answer?
We don't answer questions in public testimony.
Okay.
If you sit through the item, you'll
Okay.
probably get an answer to your question.
Okay, thank you very much. My second concern is the gates on Serena Park are broken. People are going through there with their cars. People are cutting across Serena Park. And that's in quotes because there is no park there. It's a desert. People are throwing trash into the area. People are cutting across into Palm Springs Country Club. The other day, someone was cutting across and picking limes from from the various trees. The other day, I witnessed a gentleman in a black clothing looking into houses. Why? You can only imagine. Snowbirds are not yet returning. It is a complete mess. They promised a fence. There is no fence. People can come and go as they please, enter the residential area of Palm Springs Country Club. This group is untrustworthy. I've lived there since 1911. Nothing has been done. I have been burglarized, and I know it wasn't my neighbor.
Thank you so much. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? There being none, the public hearing is closed, and we will move on to the agenda. The consent calendar includes the July 25th, 2018 study session minutes and the July 25th, 2018 minutes. I have questions. I had some questions, and I don't think I had some questions about the accuracy of some of the testimony of the applicant at the study session. I think I gave those to Flynn the other day, and I'd like to hold that for another meeting so that we can get that accurate. It was an answer to some of the questions we asked, and the response in the minutes was not complete. So I'd like to continue item 1A and move. Yep.
There is no balance of the consent calendar. We're moving minutes. We have two sets of minutes. They're the same set, are they not?
No, they're not the same set.
They're
One
dated.
is study session and one is the regular
And
session.
Chairman, you're suggesting we remove from the agenda the full
We
meeting?
continue to the next session, the study session minutes of July 25th,
But not the
2000.
not the
But
full
not the
meeting.
regular minutes.
I would move adoption of the consent calendar with that exclusion,
Oh. Yes.
the continuance.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, public hearings. VSP LLC for Timberlake Holdings and Ann Kritzman seeking approval of a conditional use permit to allow a bar lounge within the Captor Plaza at 600 East Hockwitz Canyon Way, a Class 1 historical site. Staff report, please.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, the request before you is a conditional use permit to allow a wine bar at 600 East Hockwitz Canyon Way within Captor Plaza. This is the building located at the corner of the complex, the corner of Hockwitz and Calle El Segundo. The wine lounge would be approximately 3,800 square feet in size, and they have provided a description of the proposed use as you see in the attachment to the staff report. The type of license that they are seeking with the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control is a Type 48 on-sale general license. And when staff did the analysis of this project, it is located within the Tourist Resort Commercial General Plan designation, as well as the Retail Entertainment Office designation of the Section 14 specific plan. The use is permitted by conditional use permit in the specific plan, and the parking does comply with the D downtown parking combining zone requirements, which are stipulated in the specific plan. Staff forwarded the proposal to the fire and police departments. The fire department responded with the conditions that you have as a part of the attached resolution, and the police department indicated 3 conditions as are also part of your draft resolution. Generally, the police department is concerned with liquor-related CUPs with some security. They usually require a security plan if deemed appropriate, ensure that the applicant will comply with noise ordinance stipulations, and obviously work amicably with the police department. So those are all part of your draft resolution before you. Staff made findings in support of the project, so you'll see those in your staff report. There isn't any residential adjacent to the property. It is surrounded with commercial on all sides. The nearest residential complex is further to the north of the site, so it's not directly adjacent. One thing I would note as a correction to your conditions is the applicant had noted in their request to have hours from noon to 2 a.m. daily. Staff indicated noon to midnight, so we would note that the request, the condition would be modified to allow a 2 a.m. closing. So the applicant said they don't generally go that late every day, but they want to have that option available to them. So with that, I'll conclude, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
This is like a very interesting project. I'm happy to see it make good use of the plaza. Let's see, is the applicant seeking a full liquor license or just a wine and beer license at this location?
It's a full liquor license.
So it would be full liquor license, okay? Is there a signage plan that we've developed yet, or is that just be part of Capture Plaza, or?
So there is currently an approved sign program for the complex. This building is permitted one wall sign on each street frontage. So ultimately, it would be up to the applicant and the property owner as to where the signs would be allocated.
Okay. Looking at the plans, I'm not sure which way is the main entrance to the facility.
So it looks like, I believe the main entry to the facility is at the southeast corner of the building. There's a doorway that enters into what looks like a seating area. And then they also have an entry on the west side of the space, but I don't believe that that's the primary entry. I believe the primary entry is at the southeast corner.
When we get to the applicant, maybe I just want to make sure that there's really good visibility of the entrance way coming up here. That's why I was asking the question. And then finally, is there going to be outside dining or drinking located here? Is that part of this approval, or?
That's not part of the plan.
Okay, not part of the plan at this time. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Newell, I have a question, and this applies not only to this one, but the other CUP we're looking at for Capture Plaza. In measuring the required parking requirements, you note that 85 spaces are required for this facility, for this bar, and you measured against a total parking count of 143. Is that 143 for the total parking at Capture Plaza or the western portion of Capture Plaza? And in either case, if all of these tenants are filled out, aren't we going to exceed the 143 spaces?
So
there's 85 here, and there's likely to be others that will, measuring it against the total amount, it seems like we're going to duplicate our numbers.
Yeah, so the 32,000 square footage that we note on page 3 of the report is for all 4 buildings. So that is for the entire complex. The 85 that is required is based on the downtown parking combining zone, which is a bit more lenient than our typical office standard for parking. So I believe what happened when this site was built was they analyzed it as a general business or office use, which had much higher requirements for parking. Now that it's part of the D downtown parking combining zone, the requirements are not as stringent as they used to be. So there is an excess of parking based on current standards.
But you're saying this facility, or this applicant is asked, would require 85?
No, not for this individual applicant. This is for the whole
plaza
complex.
itself.
Correct.
Okay, that was I misread that. I thought it was for this particular applicant. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Other questions? I have Commissioner Maritzi.
For Class 1 historic sites, does the HSPB weigh in on use?
They would not weigh in on use only if there were exterior changes.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question regarding music. Is outdoor amplified music prohibited? If they're not asking for...
Correct, yeah, it would not be...
Can we add a condition that says that?
We can include it. I mean, it would have to... Currently, the conditions are written that they comply with the noise ordinance, and in general, amplified sound is not permitted unless specifically identified and approved.
I think it'd be good to, at this point, if they wanted to change that, they would have to come back.
Yeah, we can include that.
Any, I can open, yes.
Does staff know the closest residential area to this site?
Yes.
And what would that be?
So to the north of the property is, well, directly adjacent to the property to the north is the parking lot
Yeah.
that previously served the convention center.
Right.
And just beyond that is the closest residential complex.
And roughly how far is that? Do you have any idea?
A mile.
I guess probably 300 feet.
300 feet. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? At this point, I'm going to open the public hearing, and the applicant, if you'd come forward, you have 10 minutes for a presentation. That should be on.
Okay now? Okay. I'm the property owner, and I just want to clarify a couple of things. Susan Sequoia did the application for the conditional use permit, and there is a outside patio that they will be using for outside that is enclosed and approved by the ABC, and they can address the office hours and things like that, but that should definitely be included. And now they're here to tell you about their operation and the business, and we're surrounded all by hotels. So we've got the Renaissance, the Hilton, Sherman's is across the street. So the disturbance to public would hopefully be very minimal. But I'll let them introduce themselves and you can talk with the owners.
Good afternoon. My name is Mikey Consbrook. I go by Mikey. I am the owner of the Wine Room in Los Angeles, and so it's always been my long-term plan to move out to Palm Springs and expand my business. The LA one started out life as a true tasting room. What I do is I represent very small winemakers throughout California, and we give them a voice in Los Angeles for their goods and wares and delicious items. By and large, I represent garageous winemakers. By definition, that is a winemaker that makes less than 2,000 cases of wine per year. A small winemaker would make about 25,000 cases per year. So what I've done is I've given these guys and gals a voice in a space that went from being a tasting room into a little wine bar. In Los Angeles, what we do is we offer over 100 wines by the glass, another 100 by the bottle. People can come in and enjoy the space in a very relaxed atmosphere. We do events where people can learn about the wine industry. They learn about the winemakers. We bring winemakers in and they do presentations and tastings. We do events where you can learn how to pair wine with food. How to identify wines blindly by just the nuances of the wine itself. This evening, back in LA, we're doing an event where we're pairing wine with music and chocolates, and we call it 5 senses to engage all 5 of your senses. So what we would like to do in Palm Springs is piggyback off of what we've done in Los Angeles and bring out really an extensive wine list to Palm Springs. In LA, I rented a building from the 1920s that used to be a library, so we rehabbed it into a wine library. Out here at the Capitol Plaza, we would like to give an homage to the history of the building, essentially create a 1950s lounge. So it's going to be wine-centric, but we are asking for a full liquor license to have classic 50s cocktails and 60s cocktails. It's going to be a lot different than your average bar that you would go to. This is not a spring break bar where there's not going to be daiquiris blended. This is going to be something that's very conversational, very fun. You can bring your family to it. You can go on a first date there. You can bring your friends, sit down, and hear each other talking to each other from across the table. We envision this as a space that is going to be a benefit to Palm Springs because there's nothing else like it right now. There are a few different wine establishments in town, but there's nothing that you can go to and learn about the California wine industry, experience it firsthand, meet winemakers, experience different educational events, and in addition, enjoy it as a regular lounge. So we're calling it the V-Wine Lounge because while it's wine-centric, we will have classic cocktails, but it's not at all going to be a club or a noisy area. So that is what we're trying to do, and that's what our goal is. And we're very excited to be here in Palm Springs. We've been saying for a while that the concept, the design is our love letter to Palm Springs. While we weren't here in the mid-century, that is the era that we absolutely love and adore. So this is our V-Wine Lounge.
Hi, I'm James Mortensen, the other owner, and I think one thing he didn't really elaborate on is that we will have part of it as a lounge that also opens up to an event space so that you can reserve the space for parties, meet the winemaker events that we can have in town so that, you know, if you want to throw your birthday party there, you can come and rent the space and, you know, have the experience of the wine and the cocktails.
Any questions?
We will ask you questions later in the public hearing. At this point, thank you. And are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? There being no members of the public, you're welcome to come back up. You have 3 minutes for rebuttal, and if you don't use that, which I'm assuming you won't, at this point in the public hearing, there may be questions from the dais, and we'd like you here if you wouldn't mind answering questions. Commissioner Donenfeld.
I have a couple questions. With respect to the special events, I assume if you're doing a birthday party or a wedding reception, people would want food to be served. How do you handle food preparation and service?
So there is not going to be a full kitchen there, but what we do have is we're speccing out a space for a caterer to use, so they can come in as a prep kitchen. So it's going to be fully compliant with all health department codes and regulations. And the space will be where someone can bring in food and warm it up or have it put together and then take out on pass around plates or set it up on like a buffet
So
area.
it'll be probably cooked and everything on off premises and just
Correct.
served on premises?
Correct, yeah. Everything, all the cooking will be off premises. In Los Angeles, what we do is we create custom charcuterie and cheese platters, none of which is required heating or cooking of any kind. We do plan on doing that in Palm Springs as well. In addition, in LA, I have partnered up with restaurants adjacent to me, and we've offered their food at the wine bar. That way somebody could sit down and order some tapas or sit down and order a pizza and enjoy that type of food with wine, something that we don't offer.
Will you be having music in the bar?
There'll be music, but it's going to be background music only. We haven't yet put together our lists, but in LA we do a lot of things from a lot of different eras, but again, it's all conversational background music. It's not going to be...
Not dance music?
No.
A lot of woofers and that sort of thing?
No, I'm way too old for that.
Because my concern would be I assume when you use the patio, those doors will be open for the most part during operations, so music will travel through those patio doors, I would imagine.
So our patio faces the Talkwitz, and so it doesn't face any of the other units. It faces the street, and then it faces the bank on the corner, which is no longer being in use. Assuming that the doors are open, the music will be at a level on the inside that is low enough that it's not going to become a nuisance for any other portion of the area.
So it's really background for conversation?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. The name of the establishment is planned to be what exactly?
It's called V Wine Lounge. V like Victor.
Okay. Are you aware there's a V Hotel in Palm Springs?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I don't know if that's going to lead to any confusion. It's not my issue, but I just think you might want to think that.
Well, because V is my brand that I started 7 years ago. So.
Oh, well, you should sue the hotel then. The other question I have is, as far as outside service, is there meant to be alcohol served outside?
Alcohol will only be served on the inside, and then it can be brought outside. There's no bars set up outside, so everything has to be poured on the inside, and then it can be taken to the patio.
So what you're saying is you could...
It can be consumed outside, but it's not.
Okay, so the ABC will require some sort of barrier to keep people from, I guess, wandering out with booze into the sidewalk or whatever.
Yes.
Is that there now? I don't remember it there now.
Currently, there's a barrier that you
just went up.
You can't access the patio from the exterior space. It's only accessible by going through the inside out the doors.
That's there now, huh?
That is there now.
Okay, I just don't remember it. Okay, and we'll have comments later, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, which is how many seats do you anticipate having outside?
The outdoor space is roughly 1,000 square feet, and so we haven't done a count as of yet, but it's going to be something that is more sit down and enjoy as opposed to stand and gather around. So I'd have to do the load calculations for what's allowed for 1,000 square feet.
Can you please turn that off? Please, you can't talk in the chamber.
And can we advise everyone else in the audience to silence your cell phones? If you have any conversations, take them outside. They do not belong here in the chamber.
Sorry about that.
No, per our architect, I'll ask what the load calculations are allowed by the health department and the general use, and we'll comply with those.
And just going to my other question, the other thing I mentioned, can somebody ask her to please leave the chamber? First time in 6 years somebody's done that. So I was a little surprised, sorry. If I add a condition that there's no outside amplified music, which means no speakers outside, that's okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? If there's an event such as a wedding or a celebration and somebody wants to make a toast, is that considered amplified?
Glenn, can you answer that?
That would be appropriate and would not be restricted by the condition.
Okay, I think any other questions of the applicant? It's the matters, thank you so much. The matter is before the commission. Comments and motions?
Chair Wermuck, I just would also note that I did a quick search on the distance between the building and the nearest residence, which is to the north. It's over 500 feet between the buildings.
I have a question of staff. I need to follow up on one item.
Yes, go ahead.
David, you had indicated there was no outside dining, but I think we think that the situation as there is that it make for any difference in the conditions?
I would only note that if there are further or any additional exterior changes, those would have to be reviewed by staff in order to determine that certificate of approval is required from the Historic Site Preservation Board.
So is there any condition that we should be adding to address that, that issue?
I would just say, yeah, we would probably want to add planning condition number 5 to indicate that exterior changes shall be approved by Historic Site Preservation Board per Chapter 8.05 of the Municipal Code.
Exterior changes, if any.
Yeah.
Unless somebody else has a comment, I'm ready to make a motion.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, from my opinion on the amplified music, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think having some amplified music out on that patio would be fine, given that it's on Tockwitz, which is a fair, it's a busy street. And as Planner Newell just mentioned, the closest residential is 500 feet away. I just don't see it as being a problem. I don't know if we could put something in there conditional on coming back in 6 months and reviewing it, but I just don't see.
It's not in the staff report now. Do you understand that?
What's not
that
in
the noise ordinance to come back for outside amplified music, they'd have to ask for it.
I'm just saying I don't think we need to put that in as a condition of our approval. I'm happy to allow them to have some outside music, given how far away the residential is. We allowed it at the Arrive Hotel. We're allowing it at the Bilardo Hotel, the one that the Hacienda's taking the place of. And the residential is much closer to those two places than it is to this. This is downtown. I just don't see it.
I don't think I think that there isn't any condition that addresses that now.
Well,
right?
I think someone's going to propose that as what. Okay.
Well, it's what they've indicated is they're not planning on having speakers outside.
I heard that. I just don't think we need to add it as a condition, given that they're, number one, not planning, and number two, even if they did have it, I just don't see it as a problem. That's my opinion.
We all want to speak here, by the way.
I think it becomes a problem because we know there are speakers and then there are speakers. And if we simply don't talk about amplified music, you're not likely to have any control over what those speakers might be. And since they haven't asked for it, I would suggest we go ahead with the condition. If things change and they feel they need it, they can always come back to us, and then we can analyze what kind of music is being provided outside.
Commissioner Wood?
Can I ask staff a quick question, to clarify something? A CUP runs with the land, is that correct?
Correct.
So whether it be this applicant or a subsequent applicant, if they pick up the CUP, it would be, these conditions would apply.
Yes.
If amplified music were indeed allowed, and the amplified music was such that it spilled over onto adjacent properties, our noise ordinance would pick that up, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if they activated the patio with a little bit of music and it became a problem, I'm just repeating myself, it would, our noise ordinance would kick in, and if our noise ordinance kicked in enough and there were citations issued, it would go against the CUP, is that correct?
Correct.
Without a condition?
It would go in the record, yes.
Okay, very good. And I guess my comments are, I am in support of the project. I want to acknowledge the applicant very strongly for vitalizing some of our historic preservation in the city and seeing the benefit to going into a historic building within our city. I really like the idea of activating the outdoor area with our climate, especially when there is absolutely, or at this point, not foreseen as a problem with neighbors. I would be in support of amplified music if they wanted it, since our noise ordinance would indeed capture it. So those are my comments.
I'm very excited about the idea of a very sophisticated use in this building, because it's a sophisticated design and it deserves this type of use. Also, I would not want to put any restrictions on amplified music at this time based on the discussion that we've just had.
Commissioner?
I'm really excited about this project. In fact, I'm too excited because I live just nearby. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I don't see a reason for restricting amplified music at this point in time unless it becomes a problem. We have the noise ordinance, which says that the noise can't travel beyond the property boundaries, and if that becomes a problem, we can address it as an amendment to the CUP. Look, Flynn's giving me a look like he has something he wants to say.
Madam Chair, I was just going to suggest, based on the comments that we've heard from the Planning Commission, what we might do is put in a condition of approval that mirrors the same conditions we placed on the outside amplified music at the Bilardo Hotel, where patrons can carry on conversations that the music isn't so loud, and then invokes the limitations that we have in the noise ordinance. So if that would be acceptable to the Planning Commission, we would transfer those same conditions here to allow outdoor amplification, but with some limitations.
Yeah, I'm not completely comfortable with this. They didn't ask for it. I was concerned about speakers on the outside because we actually have hotels in the periphery, and noise can intrude on people's abilities to sleep. But I think what they're proposing sounds lovely. I'm just not comfortable adding a condition. I'm comfortable passing the staff report. And so I guess I'll make a motion for the staff report, and if somebody wants to change it.
And Madam Chair, just to clarify, we did discuss adding a condition that if there are any exterior changes to the building, that those changes need to go before the Historic Site Preservation Board.
And would those changes include adding patio furniture? I hope it would.
Patio furniture, no, because that's movable and can be taken inside, but any permanent fencing or railings or things like that should go before the HSPB.
Well, they already have railing, is that correct?
I understood that they were putting those in as part of the ABC requirements. They're already there? Okay.
So I'm fine adding that. I just wouldn't want them to have to go back for patio furniture.
I have a question. I may misread the staff report. Do they specifically mention in the staff report there will be outside seating in a patio?
No. So
No.
I would recommend that.
You'll have to add that.
That the seating plan and fixtures.
That's acceptable to the seconder.
Seating plan and fixtures be reviewed by planning staff.
If we add that you review, it's fine.
And the hours till 2 a.m., is that acceptable?
Fine. So we have a motion and a second. Can we have a vote? That passes unanimously. We're thrilled
Really looking forward
with
to it.
your project.
Great
Please
project.
invite us to your opening, and if you don't invite us to your opening, we'll still show up at your premises at some time later. Okay. The next item is Timberlake Holdings and Ann Kritzman seeking approval of a conditional use permit to allow medical offices and personal services within the existing buildings at Captor Plaza located at 600, 650, 700, and 750 East Tockwitz Canyon Way, a Class 1 historical site. And this is a blanket CUP, so can you explain that, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So what you have before you is essentially a flexibility permit, conditional use permit for the property owner to lease. The property owner is looking for flexibility when leasing out the 4 buildings, which are known as Captor Plaza. So the properties are within the REO Retail Entertainment Office designation of the Section 14 specific plan. Within that document, there's a list of permitted uses. Currently, the requirement for the REO zone is that any medical office or personal convenience service does require a conditional use permit. The personal and convenience services are defined as barbers, beauty and nail salons, spas, tailors, dry cleaners, self-service laundries. So similar uses to those. So what the applicant is seeking today is an approval to allow any of those types of uses within the existing floor space of the buildings. As we noted with the previous item, there is adequate parking based on current parking standard requirements for the complex. And the applicant is also seeking this because it becomes cost prohibitive for future applicants when they are trying to establish a business within the existing buildings. Roughly the current cost of a conditional use permit is about $6,500 for a small business that can be checked when trying to establish in an existing location. So that is the request before you today. Obviously, there are a number of benefits to doing this, is it would allow the owner flexibility. Staff would have the ability to review each case as they come in to ensure that they comply with the conditional use permit requirements. As you see on page 3 of your report, there is a summary of lease space that is either tentative or confirmed by the property owner for each of the uses within the buildings. So that kind of gives you an idea as to what the current status is of the property and what spaces are still remaining. There are quite a bit of space that still is to be leased. So as I said, the project does comply with parking standards. The CUP would allow the owner's flexibility to lease spaces to these generally non-invasive uses to the surrounding areas. So staff is in support of the project and has prepared a draft resolution for you to consider.
Questions of staff? Starting with Commissioner Hirschbein and going that way.
Thank you. Was that the complete list of personal services in the code that you just read?
Correct. Yep.
So just specifically, any kind of marijuana uses would have to have a separate permit? Would that come before us?
Let me jump in and answer that. Cannabis is not specifically permitted in the Section 14 specific plan, so the plan would need to be amended to allow cannabis uses.
So that's out by that other document?
That's out for the time being.
Okay. I'm just throwing this out there. How about a tattoo parlor? Would that be allowed under the personal services?
No. That's not considered a use permitted under personal services.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Commissioner Calverdine?
Yeah, I wanted to raise one question, probably for Flynn first. And I just noticed in our agenda, suddenly we're getting these forms that describe the financial interests of the property owners and who it is. Are we supposed to be reviewing those with some?
It's not the responsibility of the Planning Commission to review that information, but it is there available for the public, so the public is aware of who the applicants are. This is an outcome of the recent adoption of the Public Integrity Ordinance by the City Council based on the recommendations of the subcommittee relative to that.
We should be generally reviewing that, but there's no specific.
No, there's not a need for you to specifically review that as part of your land use consideration.
Next question for David, that the drawings show some cross-hatching and some big X's on them, and I was trying to figure out what that represented.
So if you look on the first exhibit, that is 600 and 650 East Tahquitz Canyon Way, the building on the right, which is the 650 building, the hatching there is the coffee tenant. So that's an established lease, I believe. And I'm not sure if the entire building on 600 is leased fully or not, but I'll let the applicant clarify specifically what the other hatchings are.
Okay. We'll maybe address that when we get to applicant comments.
I have a question on this for David. Would all of the uses that are currently permitted, I would assume except the V Wine Lounge, which we just approved, would all of those be permitted under this blanket CUP?
All of the uses listed?
The existing leases.
Oh. Well, they would be permitted. Some of those are contingent upon this permit today.
So what I'm looking at is we have some that we've already approved, the men's salon, coffee. Mm-hmm. Which of those, would all of them come under this? So that if the applicant was releasing the building, say one of the tenants left, would they be able to put the same uses back in?
Yes.
Good. Okay, that's an opinion, sorry. I don't usually allow people to do that.
Wait.
Commissioner Callardine?
Actually, my question got asked about the cannabis request, because I noticed it was in the applicant's letter, but not in the list that the staff approved, so now we know why.
And the other question is, the reason we're doing this is where these would be normal uses permitted downtown, say, or in other commercial districts. These are uses that, because it's Section 14, they would generally come in as separate CUPs, but impede the leasing, in at least the applicant's opinion, impeded the leasing of the building?
That's correct. The general personal service use, office uses are permitted by right in our commercial zoning districts. The Section 14 plan is somewhat unique in that it does require those to obtain a conditional use permit. As the applicant has testified, that has been an impediment to leasing the remaining space here at Capture Plaza.
And an impediment to leasing a historic building. Okay, this is, now we are in public hearing. The applicant has been standing here for quite a while. You have 10 minutes for a presentation.
Okay, well, I'm Scott Timberlake, and I'm the owner of the building, and I think all of you know well the history of Capture Plaza and the challenges I faced. Flynn and David have been absolutely amazing working with me and coming up with this option of a blanket use permit, but it really didn't start from me. It came with the tenant. So a lot of these uses are already approved. Like you said, 18-8 did their conditional use permit, Coffee did their conditional use permit, there's 2 offices, and historically there's already been doctor's offices there, all sorts of health services, attorneys. Really the only unusual 2 are Coffee, which, because there hadn't been a food service, and now the Wine Lounge, which is kind of like a supper club, and I think it's really going to be an amazing asset to the building. I've had several restaurants approach me, and when I say several, I mean lots. I've refused them. I've refused grease traps. I don't want it to be a cooking facility. I don't want things outside. So I've really tried hard to put together a good mix of tenants. That said, Palm Springs is not a big tenant community. We're made up of a lot of small businesses and a lot of small operators. And I have an executive suite business already downtown Palm Springs and in Oregon that hosts about 50 to 60 individual tenants. So what happened here is we made all the space behind coffee and permitted it as executive suites. So we started signing up people. Typically they're psychologists, therapists that use this type of space. And a massage person came in, and I'm very conscious, not like if I take in one massage person, I'm not going to let in another. So I'm not going to create that competition. But he was so excited because he'd been basically working out of his house and no license. And he came down to get his business license and very excited. And they said, go to planning. And they said, that'll be $7,000. And he's renting 120 square feet. And the number, you could divide the 7,000 by the number of massages it would take. And so.
One really good one.
Yeah, so I know, and then the same thing happened with the acupuncturist. He says, I can't open here. I can't pay the 7,000. So that's when I talked to Flynn, and we came up and said, I'll pay the 7,000. Let's do a blanket so that these tenants that are supporting our community and can only afford small spaces aren't hit with this high cost every time. So it really was tenant related. It's something that I hadn't thought of, but I'd really appreciate your consideration on it.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this? There being no members of the public, you have 3 minutes for rebuttal, or you can take questions from the commission if there are any. Any questions from the commission? Thank you. The matter is before the commission comments, and then I would take a motion. Commissioner Donenfeld.
I'm very encouraged how beautifully Captor Plaza has turned out. The mix of tenant space so far is incredible. As long as the staff and Mr. Fagg can assure us that a blanket CUP permit is under the ordinance lawful, because it's the first time I've seen one, I think it's an innovative, creative way to help the applicant fill the rest of the space. So I'm very much in favor of it, and I have no questions.
Other comments or questions? At this point, comments and questions of staff?
In general, I support removing any impediments to using or leasing historic buildings. So this is, I think, a good example of how it can be done, and I'm very supportive of it.
Commissioner Woods?
If one were to read the dollars and cents of shopping centers, a couple things apply. One is design can sell. You can get higher rents with good design, and hopefully that is the case in this situation. The other thing is I really want to commend the property owner for the mix of uses. You have both daytime uses and evening uses, and you've activated it. It's not just a dead medical center. You've actually activated it with that mix of uses, and in approving this, I hope that you continue that. If any of the businesses don't succeed, then indeed you continue that kind of a mix where you have a good pedestrian traffic to the center. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have one question for staff before we get there, which is, Flynn, how do you set hours when you have a blanket CUP? Do you do some kind of a memo? What would happen?
What we could do is establish generalized hours for the general personal service and office uses if it would be desired on the part of the Planning Commission as part of this approval. What I'd probably recommend is that we allow the office and general personal service until 9 p.m. And I'm looking at the applicant to see if that would be adequate, or does it need to be later than that? 10 p.m.? We should probably have you on the microphone, but I'll just repeat that what he has said is that they would probably need until 10 p.m. for their psychologist use and other office uses. So let's go ahead.
Something like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
Correct. So we can include that.
People who do that kind of work before work hours as well. So when we make that motion, we would do that generalized. I don't think there's anything else that we need to add to this, is there?
No, we would just recommend it. So it would just be a change to Planning Department condition PLN 1, which currently has the hours permitted as 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily.
And
So
so
we-
we're looking at 6 to 10, and you'd
6
make
a.m.
that
to 10
change.
p.m.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Oh, Commissioner Donenfeld.
I move adoption of the staff report with an amendment to PLN 1 on the conditions of approval, changing the hours to 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
And, oh, it was seconded
I
by
already seconded
Commissioner
it.
Maruzzi. Our preservationists wanted to second this. All in favor? Or vote?
Okay.
This passes unanimously. Thank you for your creativity here. Okay. We are on item 2C. This is new to the Planning Commission. It's a request by the City of Palm Springs for modification or revocation of a land use permit for an estate home vacation rental property at 953 North Avenida, Palmas. And a staff report, please. And the city's the applicant in this instance, aren't they?
That is correct.
So we would have comments, but
Yes, what we would recommend is that the property owner or their representative be given 10 minutes as we would for a standard public hearing to make their case before the Planning Commission.
staff report, please. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, as has been indicated, this is the first time that you have seen a land use permit for an estate home vacation rental come before you. Just by way of background, in April of 2017, the City Council approved changes to our vacation rental ordinance. As part of that, they also amended the the zoning code to include provisions for estate house vacation rentals. An estate house is defined as any vacation rental that has 5 or more bedrooms. And so with the approval of those amendments, we began to issue land use permits for all vacation rental estate homes. In the zoning code relative to the land use permits for the estate homes, it does say upon 3 qualified violations of the vacation rental ordinance that the land use permit can be brought before the Planning Commission to either consider modifications or revocation of that land use permit. In reference to this specific property, there have been 3 qualified violations. They were as follows. On September the 23rd of 2017, there was a citation issued for outdoor amplified sound. On March 9th of 2018, there was a citation issued for not displaying their vacation rental certificate number on their advertising, and more specifically on a website advertising the vacation rental. And then on May the 26th of 2018, they received a 3rd citation. This one was also for amplified outdoor music. So with those 3 citations that were issued, only one of those was appealed. It went to a hearing and the citation was upheld. And so again, there are 3 qualified citations as we define in our code. With those citations, it is upon the city to bring the item before the Planning Commission to consider whether to either modify the conditions of the land use permit or to revoke the land use permit. In terms of staff's recommendation, because 2 of the citations were based on outdoor amplified music, and the fact that there is a complete prohibition in the vacation rental ordinance against outdoor amplified sound, there are no further conditions that we could place on this. And so based on that, and also based on the fact that outdoor amplified sound does pose an impact to residential neighborhoods, staff is recommending the revocation of this land use permit. In the associated resolution that you have in your packet, we are recommending that the land use permit be revoked and that the property owner would not be able to apply for a new land use permit until 2020. So for 2 years, they would not be able to apply for a new land use permit. Planning Commission does have the option of modifying the land use permit if you feel there are conditions that could be imposed to address the specific citations that have been issued thus far. But again, it's our recommendation to revoke. In terms of the public hearing notice that we have sent out, I have received only one response to that. I received a phone call from an adjacent property owner who offered concerns about the impact of outside amplified sound. And so that's the only thing that I've heard back in terms of the public hearing notices that went out. Separate and apart from this decision, you'll see in your staff report that the property is also used for event house permits or special events. And I've given you the list of when those have occurred and how many there have been. Also, please note that there have not been any event house permits issued during 2018. So we just have the last prior 2 years, 2016, 2017, but none in 2018. Your action today does not restrict their ability to do event house permits. However, under the language in the municipal code about event houses, if it is found that there are impacts from the use, the city manager may either modify any future event house permits or may deny future event house permits. So again, what we will do is, based on your action today, we will refer that action to the city manager to look at in case of any future event house permits. That concludes my staff report. I do have Mr. Boris Stark here, who is the Director of Vacation Rental Compliance. He can answer any questions that you might have specifically about the vacation rental ordinance and how this may apply. He may also speak to any questions you might have on the citations that have been issued. And with that, that concludes my staff report. Madam Chair, as I had indicated, once you are finished with your questions for staff, we would like the property owner or their representative to have 10 minutes to offer testimony to you, and then we would open the public hearing to anyone else who would wish to speak on the matter.
So this is a public hearing item as well?
This is a public hearing item, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Donenfeld?
With respect to the remedy, you're suggesting a 2-year suspension on the license. What are our options with respect to remedies? Are the remedy options open? Could, for example, could we revoke suspend the license for the entire ownership of the property by the current property owners? Could we go that far?
What would happen is you have the ability to either modify or revoke the land use permit, and that's the extent of the power that has been granted to you by the zoning code. As an associated action, the vacation rental compliance officer or director would then take the vacation rental certificate to the city council to revoke that as well. You can't operate an estate home without both the vacation rental certificate and the land use permit.
Who would determine what the period of suspension or revocation would be?
We are recommending a 2-year suspension, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Stark on the vacation rental certificate.
With the pleasure of the commission, I'd like Mr. Stark to speak before I take more questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The vacation rental ordinance stipulates that if a vacation rental property, specifically in this instance, if it receives 3 citations in a 24-month period, that the vacation rental permit and land use permit be suspended for 2 years.
It does say that.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Commissioner Callardine. Can you put your mic on, please?
Is there any discretion that we have about the length of this suspension, or does it have to be 2 years under the ordinance?
Regarding the land use permit, as the planning director stated, it's either modification or revocation on your part. In regards to the vacation rental certificate, based on your actions today, we will go and we will proceed with suspending the vacation rental certificate as well, depending again on your actions today.
So we're just looking at the land use permit, and these are new, so I'm trying to.
That is correct, Vice Chair.
But I'm still not clear on that. Is it 2 years or nothing? Is that what we're saying?
I suppose, yeah. I was going to say, potentially you could do longer than 2 years. I just ask, is there a lesser time frame under the vacation rental ordinance relative to the certificate?
Unfortunately, no. It's a 2-year suspension.
Okay. So it is a minimum 2-year suspension.
It's a minimum. We could go then beyond the 2 years if we wanted.
Yes.
We could go as far as long as it's owned by the current owners. We wanted to, theoretically.
One of the problems with assigning that to the current owners is ownership may change. And so it's better to specify a time period rather than
But we
time.
could go beyond the 2 years if we saw
You
fit
could
to
go
do
beyond
so.
2 years,
Thank you.
should you choose.
Commissioner Maruzzi?
Can our action be appealed?
Yes, your action can be appealed to the city council on the land use permit.
Commissioner Hirschbein, or Commissioner Woods, sorry.
I just want to reiterate that what makes this different from the appeals board doing it is the fact that this is 5 bedrooms. That's correct?
It's because it has 5 bedrooms, it requires a land use permit under the zoning code.
So the other question I was going to ask, on those that don't have a land use permit, I think we've revocated or suspended several for similar violations that are not necessarily, like maybe 4 bedrooms and less. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have suspended approximately 17 vacation rental certificates, and those properties, according to our records, are 4 bedrooms or less, and that's why those items have not come before you.
Right. And this one is only coming before us because it's a land use permit.
Correct.
Otherwise, it'd go before the appeals board, and the appeals board has suspended 17 already for similar violations.
That is correct.
The other question that I have is that many times when an event occurs, they may rent the rooms. So, you know, the event can occur, you can have a wedding, but they also may rent 5 rooms. So the event permit overlaps with the our land use permit and or the vacation rental permit. Do we know in these, particularly the 2 for noise, if an event was at the same time that the house was being rented?
Let me look at the background information here just very quickly, and I'll respond to that in just a minute if you have any other questions in the interim.
No other questions for me. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Okay, so there's 2 permits required for this property based on the number of bedrooms, correct?
That is correct.
And you indicated that there's already 3 complaints, which automatically leads to a suspension of the vacation rental permit. Is that correct?
That is correct. But before the city can act on the vacation rental permit, it is the planning commission needs to rule on their land use permit. Its land use permit is conditional on the vacational compliance department issuing them a vacation rental permit to operate as a vacation home.
Not clear on that. So
let me
in
offer
the
further
event that
Commissioner Hirschbein, let me offer further explanation. It's essentially for any home that has 5 bedrooms or more, it's a 2-step process that they have to obtain their land use permit, which is under the zoning code, and then they have to obtain their vacation rental certificate under Chapter 5 of the municipal code. If you have 4 bedrooms or less, you only have to get the one.
I got that.
5 bedrooms or more, you have to get both of them.
Got that.
So the action on the land use permit occurs first before the vacation rental certificate is suspended.
So this is a hypothetical question. In the event we vote to not suspend the land use permit, is the vacation rental board obligated to revoke the permit under the vacation rental ordinance anyway based on the number of violations?
If you choose to modify the conditions of the land use permit, then your action more or less allows them to continue doing the vacation rentals. And so based on your action, I would say that they could continue to maintain their vacation rental certificate.
Regardless of the requirement that after 3 violations, any property loses their vacation rental permit.
The municipal code states that the Planning Commission has the option after 3 qualified violations of either modifying or revoking. And so even with 3 violations, you are hearing this in a public hearing today, and you're making a determination whether it should be modified or revoked. And so based on your termination, they could continue with the vacation rental if you choose to modify rather than revoke.
Okay, I have another question, 2 actually. What's a qualified violation? You used that term a couple times in your report.
That's the language specifically in our zoning ordinance. What it means is that it can't just be a neighbor calls and says, it's too noisy over there.
Okay, got it.
Qualified violation means that we have sent someone to the site, they've verified that the violation has occurred, and a citation has been issued accordingly.
Okay, so then my next question is, and this is my last one, I promise. Are there unqualified violations against this property? In other words, have people called up to complain about it, and it's been investigated and a violation not been qualified?
Yes, there have been other calls to the location.
And do we know how many?
Is there a particular year you would like information
Well,
on?
last
Yeah.
rolling 12 months.
Why don't you tell us all
Okay,
of them?
so in 2017, we had 3 calls to the on the property, and in 2018, we only had 1 call to the property.
Okay, thank you.
And were they all noise?
I believe that they were all related to noise. That's correct.
And what that meant is that your inspector didn't get, when they got out there, the noise wasn't still going on, is that correct?
That is correct. They were not able to find a valid violation upon arrival.
Yeah, I had noticed in one of the violations, they got out there 4 hours after the call. And the noise was still going on.
I have a question.
While he researches that, if I could respond to Commissioner Wood's question that he asked earlier, if any of the violations had occurred while there was also an event house permit, going over the records that I have, I show that there wasn't any overlap between those 2 types of permits.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask some at this point. In terms of qualified violations for the properties you've revoked that were 4 or less bedrooms, would those have included the same kinds of violations where you would have a failure to notice and noise?
That is correct. They were identical if additional, they were all in the same realm of violations. That's correct.
Commissioner Kellerstein, your questions.
Flynn, the question was raised earlier, could we extend the period of the lapse of the permit? And I think you said yes. Could we alternatively shorten the period if we felt so?
Based on Mr. Stark's testimony that the time period for the suspension of a vacation rental certificate being a minimum of 2 years, the answer is no, that we would need the land use permit to go concurrent with the vacation rental certificate in terms of the suspension.
Okay.
Can I begin to open the public hearing? Are you done?
All right.
Good. The public hearing is at this point opened. If the, I guess it's the appellant or the landowner is here and they would like to make a presentation, could you come forward?
My name is Andra McGill, and I'm the Regional Operations Manager for Beaumont Villas by Natural Retreats, and we manage the home and are here representing the homeowner for the home. We call it the Sandacre Estate. This is William Saig. He's the general manager of our business there. The owner couldn't make it today, so we wanted to come and speak on his behalf. So we have a lot of the same questions that you had, and you cleared a lot of that up in regards to the land use permit versus the vacation rental side of things. I think one thing that we really wanted to note was that none of these have occurred during any events. We used to use the home very frequently for weddings and parties and things like that. Once the noise ordinance was passed, the vacation rental things became more strict. You'll see, have not applied for any events there in 2018, trying to be very respectful to the neighbors and be a good partner in the community in terms of respecting the noise and the quality of life of the neighbors around. We are concerned from the owner's perspective, that they could potentially lose the land use permit on the home for 2 years. Some of the sound, violations, we haven't appealed them because they are clear, they are clear violations, but I think you'll note that one of them was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon before the guests had even unpacked, or, it wasn't like there was a loud party. They were just turning on music while they were checking in. We've adjusted our check-in policies from the vacation, from the management side, from the company side of things in terms of, when we check people in, we're very clear about the noise. We do it in person. We follow all of the rules. So we would just like you to consider not revoking the land use permit completely so that this home can still, operate in some way. Do you have anything that you'd like to?
Madam Chair and Honorable Commissioners, as my colleague, I'm William Saig, General Manager, as Andra stated.
Yes, in reviewing the citations, one of them did occur on a Saturday at 2 p.m. when the guest was checking into the property and unloading. They had some music going while they were taking the groceries out of the car and putting them in the house. A second violation was for the permit number not being on a marketing partner website, which we have since rectified. The third violation was over a holiday weekend, again during daylight hours, although a little bit later in the day, understandably, certainly before sunset. So also as mentioned, these events occurred, these 3 citations occurred during occupancy, and you know, 2 of the 3 during occupancy, and then the third was a clerical error. None of these were associated with events that we had at the home. Our company has been in existence for over 12 years, and basically we've always abided by and worked very closely with the city in our contracts with the guests to make sure that we abide by all the ordinances and continue to do so. We are a very high-touch agency in town and always have been. We meet and greet guests at the home. We have them fill out the form as required by the city. And keep track of that, and you know, submit all the contract summaries and all that. And so we are trying to work our business in conjunction with the city to protect the neighbors and continue to keep the city a viable option for people looking to vacation. I beseech you to please consider this very carefully, because this is a landmark, very important thing that's happening here today. We were very confused about it, and quite frankly still are a little bit confused about the ramifications of this, because it does cross over between both the Planning Commission and the short-term vacation rental aspect of properties moving forward in Palm Springs. And this home in particular is one of the homes that a homeowner might not be able to afford if he didn't have the rental income. And because he does have the rental income, he's enabled to reinvest that money in the home and keep the upkeep of the home and make improvements to the home. It's in a very prestigious Movie Colony neighborhood. It's a very prestigious landmark home, and we want to keep it in very good operating condition. You know, there were many times, as mentioned previously, that the city was called out for a sound complaint, and the sound complaint was stopped because back then we got the phone call first, and we could get to the guests very quickly and tell them to quiet down. We didn't know they were making noise. And so, as mentioned previously, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a couple of hours now, since there's, last I heard, only 5 people on the city who can even write out a citation by visiting a home. And so we've installed noise-aware devices as a proactive measure so that we can get an alert on our text, on our cell phone, so we can reach out to the guest and tell them to quiet down in a house before they upset the neighbors. You know, we've always tried to have peaceful coexistence in our rental homes, and we have a very good track record of that. Unfortunately, it's more challenging these days. And, you know, we're trying to do our best to keep up with what the ordinances are and inform our guests of that as much as possible to try and keep things to a minimum as far as being disruptive. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? If you'd come forward.
Yes, my name is Dave Schultz. I live within 500 feet radius of the property in question. I've never experienced any trouble with any of the events or any of the short-term guests for at least the last 8 or 9 years. As these folks have said, this is a very prestigious property. We know it as the Louis B. Mayer Estate. It's also known as the Marilyn Monroe House. It's quite an unusual property. We've had the opportunity to attend a couple of corporate events and supply some vintage vehicles as decoration. I've had opportunities to go throughout the property, throughout the house. It's extremely well maintained. We have no complaints. Having said that, I believe that what the city has done is a good thing towards the ordinances for short-term vacation rentals. Nobody likes loud, blaring music. Evidently, the property owner has a reputable company trying to manage the property on his behalf. I'm not sure I agree with the fact that one of these violations appears to be an administrative or clerical error. So I think that, in my opinion, I would have a hard time justifying any punitive action by this council on the property owner. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? The applicant the management company has 3 minutes for rebuttal if you wish to take it. If you're still here and you would come up, there is one question for you. We'd like to do that. Oh, if you'd like to speak, please come forward.
My name is Frank Sandine, and I live near to the property being discussed. And I just want to reiterate what the gentleman ahead of me said. It seems to me like the technical error of not showing the license on their website should be a different thing as opposed to the 2 violations that were made regarding noise. And it seems to me that at the worst, the council should consider that there were 2 violations that would affect the neighbors. The technical error doesn't seem right to me that it would be counted as a 3rd violation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If the representatives of the property owner would come back, there is a question for them. Commissioner Calverdine?
Yes, towards the end of your testimony, you mentioned a noise-aware device that somehow, could you describe how that works for us and what it does?
Yes, it's about the size of a Glade plug-in air freshener, and it uses electricity from the electrical outlet, and it's screwed into the outlet so it cannot be removed. It measures sound. It doesn't record anything. It's merely like a smoke alarm. It senses sound and the level of the sound.
And what happens when it senses an exceedance?
Get an alert. So all of our team gets an alert immediately on their phone. It's an app, basically, that alerts us.
Do you know what level of sound triggers it?
I believe it's set to the ordinance here.
We have it set on the dashboard, they call it. We have the level set to below what the city levels are. So we get a notification on our cell phone.
All right. I want to follow up with staff on this program.
We're using that in all of our vacation rentals at this point. We have a few owners who have opted not to do it, and we'll probably just go ahead and do it for them.
Where is that device placed on the property?
It's placed in various places outside, but particularly in the gathering areas where we foresee the most noise, where we can get ahead of it first and get over to the house and deal with it. So in the seating areas on the patio.
Nothing on the perimeter of the property, but inside the property itself?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
What's the company's procedure upon receiving an alert?
We generally either call, text the guest, and then head over to the house.
So once you're alerted, someone from your company is required to go to the house?
Yes, that's the procedure. It brings us back to the place where we used to be years ago, where we would get the phone call first before when the noise complaint hotline received a call, and they would call the agency first for the emergency contact number, and one of our staff would go to the house. So we've got the advance notification that there might be excessive noise. Our experience has also shown, quite frankly, during the daytime, it's usually the gardener with the leaf blower.
Right.
But, you know, we still respond when we know guests are in residence to the alerts that show on the cell phone.
And how, do you have staff 24 hours, and how far away from the property are they?
Yeah, I mean, we've got one staff on the south end
that lives down by the Canyon Estates, and other staff on the uptown side across from Toucans. And then I'm moving into actually down the street. So one of us can usually get to there within 15 minutes.
And in the chance that they can't get there, they will call immediately, and we'll let guests know that we're also, monitoring noise, taking care of it, so they're not surprised if they receive a phone call or a visit.
Thank you. And no other questions?
I have a question for staff.
Right. Comments, and you can have a question for staff and also comments.
I noticed on one of the noise complaints that the decibel level was, I think, roughly 49 decibels at 7 p.m. And normally 49 decibels would not be considered a nuisance in a lot of ways, but I guess our ordinance says if you can hear it outside at the property line, isn't it that what triggers it? Or any amplified noise?
The vacation rental ordinance prohibits any amplified noise, any music across property lines.
When we get a complaint, do we actually confirm that there is amplified music that's outside?
We do. Upon a code officer's arrival, they listen for music.
They listen for it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And they will record the decibel level as a part of a long-term study of noise coming from vacation rentals.
Okay, and is the 49 decibels is considered a nuisance?
Actually, going to the city's noise ordinance in a single-family residential neighborhood, after 6 p.m., the decibel level at the property line is 45 decibels, so it actually was in excess of what is permitted. Okay. Not by much, but it was in excess.
It's still double the energy, but okay. That's all I have right now.
Commissioner Maruzzi.
Can we comment at this point?
If there are more questions for staff. I have one for Flynn. The person who called you, did they indicate where they lived?
They indicated that they lived immediately west of this property, so they're the neighbor across the back property line to the west.
And do we know if that's the same person who's complained before, or do we not know who the complainants are?
I don't know if it was the same, no.
This is before the commission. Commissioner Woods, if you'd just going down the line.
There's no doubt that this is a beautiful estate. It's quintessential iconic Palm Springs, and it's got a grand entrance to it. And it's wonderful if you can afford it, you can participate in such a grand estate. However, I am in support of staff on this, and we went through a very difficult, contentious, expensive election process on how to regulate vacation rentals. We established a multi-million-dollar department on how to regulate vacation rentals. And it was very clear that 3 violations equals revocation or potential revocation. We have an appeals board who's upheld anyone who's appealed the similar type of revocations on this. I feel that as a commissioner, I need to uphold the will of the citizens who voted, and I need to uphold the law of the land on this. And I don't see this as any gray area. I see it as being quite black and white on this. There's really not a huge gray area to participate in. The fortunate thing for the property owner and for the rental agency is it can still be produced as a high-income producing event house. This does not limit it to be produced to be, the staff recommendation does not eliminate the event house opportunity for this. It only eliminates, if the staff recommendation is approved, it only eliminates the ability for people to spend the night in the house on this. So my support is with the staff recommendation on this. Thank you.
Commissioner Maruzzi.
It's unfortunate that the Planning Commission has to evaluate these sorts of things, and that's obviously what the Appeals Board is for. They know the questions to ask, they know the law. Nonetheless, I have to agree with Commissioner Woods. I mean, I don't feel that the 3 violations should be appealed. I believe that they are appropriate and revocation.
Commissioner Hirschbein, comments?
Yeah, I was originally very strongly against the commission taking on this responsibility, as some of you that were here remember, and I still feel that it's not our area of expertise, unfortunately. And I still don't understand if we let it, if we don't revoke the land use, if the vacation rental group is required to revoke it, so what would be the point of us acting anyway? So I'm mixed up, to say the least, on this, kind of a bureaucratic mix-up in my head on this. But given that, I think Dennis's comments about the amount of effort that's gone into this over a long period of time, I would have to support the revocation.
Commissioner Donenfeld?
I think Mr. Woods stated it very succinctly and appropriately. I think strict compliance to this ordinance is important to the people of Palm Springs. This is a very controversial issue. Many people are very, very concerned about their peace and quiet and being able to enjoy their neighborhoods. There are 3 violations here. I think an administrative violation is no less important than an actual violation. They're equally important in my view, so I think there are 3 violations. I would support the staff report as well.
Commissioner Calverdine?
I'm not sure we have any discretion here, unfortunately. It looks as though we've got to essentially have to follow the ordinance, and even if we didn't follow it, then the appeals board would, the vacation rental policy would take away the vacation permit. So I'm going to vote for the staff report. I'm not sure if I agree with the way the ordinance is worded or is being implemented here, but that's not my job at the moment. So I'm going to support the staff report.
I completely agree with Commissioner Woods and Maruzzi and my other commissioners in terms of the choices that are in front of us, and it has to do with the fact that we had a very contentious discussion about vacation rentals. I know in experience as a homeowner rep in my homeowner association, the discomfort people feel when they hear noise that isn't controlled. And I think we owe it to the voters, to the people who voted no, as well as the people who voted yes on the vacation rental ordinance, to support the letter of the ordinance. I think I'm heartened to hear that they have put in, and they are putting, the management company is putting in alert devices. Because of that, I'm not going to make any recommendations to the city manager. I wouldn't suggest recommendations to the city manager that they also hold up event permits. That seems to have gone smoothly, and it looks like they might be able to continue to do that in a smooth fashion, but I am going to uphold the staff report, and I would take a motion on this in a second. Do I have a second? I'll second it if no one does. Can you call the vote? That passes. Yes, this passes unanimously, and we are going to take, it is not 11 o'clock, correct? We're going to take a 10-minute break. Does somebody have the exact time?
Yes, we'll come back at 3:15, Madam Chair.
At 3:15, great.
Very well said.
Planning Commission is back in session. At the request of the Planning Director, we are going to move item 4A up and take that next. So, staff report, this is the request by Dan Spencer on the behalf of James Burba and Robert Hayes for a major architectural review approval for the construction of a 1,238 square foot addition to an existing hillside single-family residence at 282 West Camino Carmelita. Staff report, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As introduced, this is a major architecture review application for the proposed 1,236 square foot additions to a hillside property. The project site is located within the Mesa neighborhood, and this property was originally built in 1937, and it's a Class 3 historic site. The property has a Spanish-style architecture. It's a single-family building with a detached carport and attached garage. And the project site consists of 3 parcels, which are held as one parcel under a covenant. As you may recall, the applicant is in the process of right-of-way vacation. On this image, I think you can see the purple section. This is currently a Camino del Monte right-of-way, which is going to be vacated. And once the vacation is completed, the property will gain 3,985 square feet of a space. This is the existing residence and the proposed additions. The project proposes addition of a 691 square foot garage, 337 square foot pool pavilion, and a 208 square foot gym. The reason why this is here today is because addition exceeds 40% of the square footage of the existing residence, which is 2,546 square feet. The property has currently developed with the terracotta clay tiles, the brick veneer, which is painted bone white, and the applicants are proposing to apply these architectural features to the proposed additions. These are the elevations of the proposed buildings. As you can see, the exterior of the additions and the existing residence will match. The project proposes the pool, gym, and the garage, all of which meet the building height regulations stated in the zoning code. And then also, the project's going to include an attached garage to meet the off-street parking requirement in the zoning code as well. The garage will accommodate a mechanically operated roll-up garage door, which is going to be painted to match the existing residence. And the pool pavilion and the gym, we will have a similar architectural features for a visual consistency. Staff finds that the proposed project is compatible in design and material and massing to the existing primary residence. The site is adequate in size to accommodate the proposed additions, and it will not alter the single-family residential appearance of the property, and the project complies with applicable development standards, and for the reason recommend approval to the Planning Commission. Staff and the applicant are both available to answer any questions you may have, and this concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Are there any questions of staff? There being none, I have one, and it's just that this is a historically significant but not a National Register property. The additions on it are identical to the existing facade of the building, and the reason that's being done is because they're separated from the building. Is that correct? That it's generally additions on historic properties indicate that they're additions.
You're referring to the Secretary of the Interior standards
Right.
relative to historic properties, and you're correct. When there is an addition to a structure that has been deemed to be historically significant, it's preferred that the addition be visible and detectable as being separate from the original structure. In this case, because the additions are not directly attached to the exterior walls of the original house, they're separated by breezeways. They are separate and distinct, and so staff felt that this is appropriate, and we have recommended approval of this request.
This is taken, there being no other questions of staff. This is before the commission. Are there any comments before we get a motion? No, we don't have any reason to ask the applicant to come up in a public hearing. I'm not, can you let us know what the Architectural Advisory Commission did?
Yes, the Architectural Advisory Committee recommended approval of the request. It was actually on their consent agenda, so there were no questions or issues with the proposal.
Are there any comments, or can I get a motion?
My only comment is that this looks really good. I want to congratulate the team that has worked on it. It really looks like you've kept the character of the house while really improving it, particularly, you know, every modern house has got to have a garage these days, so that became a requirement. But it really looks like good, and the addition of the gym and the pool house will be really improve this significant property.
Any other comments? Can I get a motion from somebody?
I'll recommend staff recommendation.
I'll second.
My panel isn't. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we call the question? Something is wrong with my screen.
It's being showing is voted.
I voted yes. My screen isn't working, but that wouldn't keep me from voting yes. This passes unanimously. We all think it's a great project. Congratulations. Okay, moving right along. The next item is also a public hearing item. It is 2D. It is Toll Brothers on behalf of Palm Canyon 65 LLC for a time extension of the entitlements to construct and subdivide a residential development consisting of 57 detached single-family residences, 25 multifamily residential condominiums, open space, and private streets on a 12.3-acre parcel of land located at 777 South Palm Canyon Drive. Staff report, please.
Yes, Chair Wermuck and Commissioners. The request before you is an extension of time for a previously approved residential project over a 12.3-acre site. The site was previously developed with the Rock Garden Cafe, which has since been removed, and all that remains is the parking area of that site. It also includes the land to the south and west of the former Rock Garden Cafe. So the applications before you are a request to extend the plan development, major architectural approvals, as well as the tentative tract map. As you'll recall, as you may recall, this project was approved back in September of 2016. Since that time, there was a lawsuit that was settled, which delayed the ultimate approval date to January 19th of 2017. So the 2-year time frame by which an applicant is to exercise the entitlement would expire or is limited to January 19th of 2019. So the request today is for an additional 1 year from that date. The project, as you noted, is a 57 single-family residential project with 25 condominiums. The site, or the image on the screen shows you the aerial of the project site between Palm Canyon and Berlardo Road, just north of Mesquite Avenue. So the layout is configured in that you have 57 residences to the west of the condominiums, which are fronting Palm Canyon. There's a common area pool at the southeast corner of the project and additional open space at the northwest corner and northeast corners of the site. These are exhibits that were part of the approval back in September of 2016, just showing the recreational area, common areas of the project, and some landscape areas around the multifamily residential. This exhibit shows the Palm Canyon elevations of the multifamily development area. And these are the 3 plan options that were approved as the conceptual architecture for the project back in 2016 for the single-family homes. With the the property owner is in negotiations with Toll Brothers Inc. to buy the property. So Toll Brother has been looking at the approved plans and looking at some of the challenges with the site in relation to topography and grading. And so some of the things that they've investigated are some changes to the pads for the single-family homes for the project, and some of the challenges that would require some significant retaining areas, retaining walls for the project. With the location of Belardo dropping from the north to south, there's quite a significant slope on the westerly edge of the site, adjacent to Belardo. So, as you can see in this exhibit that was prepared by Toll Brothers engineer, it shows that they would require, you'll see it as the blue, some retaining areas that are 4 to 8 feet, retaining walls that are 4 to 8 feet in height, primarily along the westerly edge of the site. So in order to avoid some of the retaining along the westerly edge where you have the houses probably, the top of the house is closer towards the street grades, they're looking at changing some of the pads along that edge of the project, reconfiguring the location of the pool area and the dog park area with respect to the location of lot 15 on this plan. So what you see here is the plan, the layout that was approved by council with the paseos between the rear of the lots in the center of the project and the common area pool lot in this location. So the retaining walls in blue here that you see range from 4 to 8 feet in height. The green range from 2 to 4 feet. And the red is roughly 1 to 2 feet. So there's quite a significant slope adjacent to Belardo here, so that's why the retaining walls would be as high as they are in this area. So the stepping of the pads would be more terraced in their current configuration. The applicant is essentially trying to reduce the amount of terracing down from the north to south and have more of the retaining along this edge with their current plans. And of course, any changes that were different from the plan that was previously approved would come back before the planning commission.
Can you confirm that these changes aren't what we're being asked to approve today? Is that correct?
Correct. These are just informational purposes for the commission, and any additional comments you may want to provide the applicant would be for their benefit. But the item for you today to consider is only the time extension of the project.
Can you talk about the time extension and the reasons?
Sure. So the applicant, as I noted, did deal with a lawsuit on the project, and that was, as I said, settled about 121 days after it was initiated. So that delayed the applicant from exercising the entitlement. They have also looked at some changes to the site plan, particularly with the elimination of the paseos between the rear of the single-family homes in the center of the property to deal with some of the issues of variation in slope and terrain, and really privacy with the variation of the pads that would occur, and trying to reduce the issue of having an alleyway between the homes. So that's what they've been investigating. And so what they have presented today, or at least provided to the commission for informational purposes, are some of those changes that they are considering. So I'll go up to the screen and show you as I did before.
Can you also show us what changes the council made when it got approved by council?
Well, those are all listed in the conditions, and I can go through those too. So as I mentioned, the paseos behind the houses were located in these two locations. They range from 10 to 30 feet. So the applicant is proposing to eliminate those and provide pedestrian sidewalks on one side of the street for the private streets. So all streets would have a sidewalk along the frontage, at least one side for the interior streets. So those are some of the things that they're kind of investigating. As I mentioned, lot 15 in the original plan here is being relocated at this time to this location, or that's something that they are considering. So they would have a larger pool or dog park area between these two locations. So when some of the things that they are also considering, as I mentioned, are eliminating the paseos, revising the location of the pool area and dog park area, the common lot space, reducing the driveway width to allow additional pedestrian access at the northwest corner of the site, and a storm drain parcel at the southwest corner of the site. They're exploring alternatives for the regional storm drain line locations because there are some large storm drain lines that enter the site along the westerly edge. So they are looking at some additional ways to address those issues. They are proposing pavers in the landscape areas along Palm Canyon and in the emergency access driveway, as well as the sidewalk areas. So that would be an enhancement for the pedestrian experience. And they would also increase the single-family lots to be more usable for the outdoor space. And finally, as Toll has done with their project in Asina, they are looking at a benefit burden easement on the side yards of each of the single-family homes to create more usable side yard space for the project. So those are some of the changes that they are considering. When we look at the findings required for an extension of time in the zoning code, there is a question as to whether there have been any changes to the project. So that is why we did identify these as potential changes to the project based on the direction that the applicant is, based on the direction the applicant has given us in their negotiations with the current property owner. So staff has provided findings in support of the extension of time. Your action today would be to recommend approval of the tentative map to the City Council and approve the plan development and major architectural applications as a part of the draft resolution attached to your report. The only other thing I would like to note is that supplemental materials that were given to you today include fire department condition revisions. So those are part of your additional materials. And the things that are highlighted are the changes from the previous conditions that were presented to the council back in 2016. Essentially, those changes involve revisions based on the project changes as well as revisions to code changes or updates. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. I know the applicant is here and they can present any additional information.
Before I take this to the commission, in terms of the timelines, that 115 days was added to the time, correct?
Yes.
So that they've had two and a half, essentially 2 1/3 years.
Right. They still have 4 more months, essentially, at this point.
And the reason this is coming to us is because they lost the builder they were working with, and they're working with a new builder with different requirements. Is that correct?
They are working with a new builder, yes.
That's, I just wanted to go to the extension issues. I'll take questions, starting with Commissioner Donenfeld.
I would like to ask our attorney, one of our findings, and Mr. Newell alluded to this, we have to find, in order to extend the PDD, there have been no significant changes to the proposed project. As Mr. Newell explained, it sounds like they're going to be coming for significant changes to the project, not just based on the lawsuit, but general changes in the overall layout of the plan. Are we within the law to make this finding knowing that there are going to be such significant changes to the plan?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, you are correct. That is a required finding in order to approve the extension. The Commission will have to make its own judgment whether it believes that the project is having no significant changes or not based on the evidence provided. I know staff is, indicating that, there are some changes proposed, but their position is that they are minor. If the Commission believes that they are not minor, the Commission can make the opposite finding.
Is there any case law that gives us some direction on that in terms of what's significant?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. It's really a factual finding.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might just go into why the staff found the way that they did, is the number of units remains the same general configuration of the property is not changing. We find it to be generally consistent with the conditions of approval that City Council has applied to the project. And so consequently, that's the basis of our findings, is that it is not significantly different than what was approved.
Commissioner Calverdine, yes.
Yeah, following up, Flynn or Dave or whoever, when this project was approved by the City Council, was that a final PD or a preliminary PD?
Preliminary.
So this will be coming back to us then for the final PD that would probably be inclusive of these changes?
Yes.
So we'll be seeing the design changes as a separate action, and we'll have to, at that time, find that the final map is consistent mostly with the preliminary map.
Right.
So that's how the process would work. Okay, thank you. Oh, I had a couple other questions I meant to ask. Do we have a copy of the settlement of the lawsuit? I didn't even realize this had been settled, and I think it would be relevant to get a copy of that.
Yes, Mr. Callahan, I can speak to that. My understanding is that the settlement agreement between the parties was confidential. Now, I understand, just got some recent information, that may be a separate settlement agreement that, I haven't heard of until now, where the City of Palm Springs is a party. That one may not be confidential, but I don't have a copy of that. I can't speak to that.
Was the city party to the original lawsuit? I would think they would have to be.
My understanding is that this was a sequel lawsuit, so the city was named as a party, and then the developer was named as what we call the real party in interest. That's a technical pleading term.
But wouldn't the city have to be party to any settlement?
My understanding is that there may have been two agreements, one confidential, one where the city actually signed, but we would have to flag that down further.
I certainly hope we have that and can describe how that's worked out before we get the revised site plan back.
Do you have comments to that? Going in that direction, my understanding is that one of the items that was settled was the elimination of the paseos in the litigation. Is that correct?
I can't speak to the specific terms of the confidential settlement agreement. I don't know. What I can tell you is, for purposes of the extension here, the settlement does not affect the discussion or the conditions of the extension in this case.
We're really looking at the old plan, right? Not the one that's up there, right?
We are extending the old plan, yes. Right. That's correct.
Yeah, the extension of the plan, the extension today is of the previous plan, but it is important to note that if the commission has concerns with the current information that is before us, those probably would be pertinent for the applicant to know moving forward.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, one of my questions is what were the lawsuit conditions, but I guess we don't have that information currently. They're asking for an extension for the tentative track map, the preliminary PDD, and one other extension. Is that right? Was there 3 extensions they're asking for?
So the extensions that you're considering today are the plan development, the tentative track map, and the major architectural associated with
and the
that.
Major architectural. Are any, if the extension is not granted, are any of those 3 extensions appealable to council?
Yes,
Which ones?
all.
All of them are appealable to council.
Because your action today on all 3 items, well, your action is approve or recommended action is approve the plan development extension and major architectural extension, and recommend council approve the tentative track map. If the commission chooses to deny any of those, then that would be final decision unless appealed.
But all 3 of those, assuming we don't agree to extension, they're all 3 of them are appealable to council?
Yes.
Okay. What was the public benefit cited in the original approval?
It was the project itself. It's in our staff report. It was the project itself, and then it was the piseos and walkways and parks, so that the piseos have been eliminated through the lawsuit, I believe.
Okay.
Not up for.
Right, and the public benefit is probably because if it changed because of the lawsuit, would we have to look at that again, Flynn, if one of the items has been removed?
Yeah, again, no, you would not need to do that if it were impacted by the settlement.
And we don't know that. We think that might be.
Yeah, it does not impact your decision on the extension of time of the applications today, no.
Okay,
and
but
Commissioner Hirschbein, some things changed between what you remember at Planning Commission and with City Council approval. And maybe if Flynn knows what those, I know that
well, I know one of them was we had a little public plaza up at the northeast corner of the site. I think that got eliminated. I was also interested, so the public benefit was the project itself and the piseos. And did a code get changed that disallows the project itself as a public benefit currently?
We're recommending that to council.
Oh, so that hasn't been enacted, okay.
Here, Wormack, a copy of the public benefit is part of the resolution. It's page 7 of the council approval resolution, which is one of the attachments in your report. So resolution 24-100, page 7 has the public benefit described.
The project providing internal pedestrian piseos and enhancing circulation. Okay, thank you for that. Can you describe, okay, so when this was going through the PDD process originally, I was on the AAC, and then I think I moved to Planning Commission, and it was still going through. We'd seen it a number of times in a number of different configurations. And one of my chief concerns was to provide a landscape buffer along the north property as it abuts the Tockwitz Creek Trail. And if I'm not mistaken, we had a 20-foot or more buffer across the whole length of the northern property line within the property of the development. And we came up with an idea that the houses themselves would form the back wall of the habitable spaces, and then from that point out would be a minimum of 20 feet, which would be landscaped as part of the development and maintained by the development. And it seems to me the proposal, and I know we're not analyzing the proposal, it'll come before us again, but is part of the proposal to eliminate that buffer or to modify it?
They're still maintaining a buffer along that northerly edge. I don't believe it's 20 feet, and I don't recall.
It's actually 6 feet, according to the drawing you gave us.
Right, and they still have, they still are required to enhance the the trail adjacent to the site in the wash area. So that's still one of the requirements of the project. So they would still be adding landscape and trees in that area for the connection of Tahquitz Creek Master Plan.
But that's within the land that's not owned by this development. Are they required to maintain that?
I think what Michael's question is going to is what did council finally approve? And that's a question for Flynn, because I know they made some changes to what we approved. Is
Yes,
the
and Mr.
architecture finally approved? What happened to the sidelines?
We'll ask Mr. Newell to respond to that, as he has been prepared to respond to that.
So what the council ultimately approved is what you see on this site plan. So the 20-foot buffer was not a requirement.
On which site plan? On that one?
This one here.
That one?
This is the site, no, excuse me. This plan here.
Yeah, but I don't.
It's 12 feet, I believe it's a 12-foot buffer.
Do I have that plan?
Is that in our packet?
Yes.
Is this the one that's in our packet?
Links.
Yes. Yeah, it's a 12-foot buffer. You see it. It's an 8.5 by 11 size sheet. It's in the front of the color exhibits, or actually behind the landscape exhibit. But it's a 12-foot buffer that was ultimately approved by the council. And one of the things that did change as well was they eliminated one of the single-family homes as a part of the revision to the project at the northwest corner and created a park space.
Well, the trail says, it says the trail's 12 feet wide, but it doesn't say the buffer, and it doesn't also show the property line. So I don't know that that's...
The access trail is on the northerly edge of that property line.
So
We're just defining that as...
12-foot wide trail, that's within the property?
The trail is not within the property. That's showing trail access. The text that you see on the site plan is the trail access points.
On this one?
No, behind that one.
We're not trying to change this. We are trying to determine what the existing plan is, and so that's the hard part. I think questions going to what the existing plan is we're extending are appropriate, and when we get into comments, we can talk both about the extension and the proposals the applicant's making, but just, was the architecture all approved? We don't know what council approved.
Well,
we know it came to us, but we don't know.
Yeah, well, ultimately the city council approved what you have in your packet. The 8.5 by 11 sheets are what the council approved. So 57 residential lots, 25 condominium properties, a 12-foot buffer along the northerly edge. The trail is outside of the property and would be required to be improved by the applicant. It may have differed from the time it went to the AAC because it went multiple times.
It's what got approved by Planning Commission and Council, and just to understand what it, because we have a memory that might be different than council approval. But can you tell me, was the architecture approved? Because with some projects, the major architectural has been approved, and with others, like the one that's coming next, we didn't approve that.
Right.
So on this one...
The final development plans were not approved. Those were only conceptual plans at the time.
Conceptual architecture.
But the conceptual architectural plans were approved. The council actually got to architecture.
Correct.
I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, but I'm sorry, I just don't understand this. Is the 12 feet that you're referring to as a buffer within the applicant's property?
There's a 12-foot buffer common area buffer within the property, yes.
Okay, and is that outside of the wall that would define the adjacent house lot, residential lot?
The buffer area included partially a courtyard space in the original architecture. Partially, it was not, it was open to the north of the site.
So part of the buffer actually isn't a buffer at all. It's a courtyard for the house. Is that right?
In the original architecture, yes. The changes that they're proposing are different than what was originally approved, though.
Okay, and what does that change?
It's the 11 by 17 sheet attached.
No,
to
but I mean, are they reducing the buffer? Are they increasing the buffer?
In the plan before you, it's shown as a range. It looks like the average is about 6.5 feet, maybe 5 feet.
And that's outside of the wall of the adjacent property?
The wall of the single-family homes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it goes from 12 to 6.
In the plan, that's conceptual at this point, yes.
Okay, thank you. And have they so another issue that was before us when we were approving this was the view from Bellardo. And one of the reasons, I know in AAC we looked at this very carefully, was that because the lots were below Bellardo, it seemed that the view was less impacted. And that was one of the reasons that I think some people voted to approve the project. And now it sounds like they want to raise the pad up, which would be more of an impact to the view from Bellardo. Is that correct?
The houses are, yes, more closer to the street grades.
So the view from Bellardo would be more impacted than in the original design?
You would see more of the architecture and yes.
Less of the view?
Less of the valley to the east, yes.
Yeah, okay. Let me just see if I have one more question, but I don't think I do. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
That does it for questions of staff. We will now go into the public hearing.
Which has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Part of my questions were already asked by two other commissioners, so I appreciate that tenacity by those commissioners. I wasn't here during the approval, so I'm just curious, along Bellardo, were retaining walls proposed at all in the original approval?
They were not defined at the time. It was just the pad heights of the homes. So there would have been retaining walls. They were just not defined because it was more preliminary in design. It was not the final development plan, which is what they're trying to get achieved at this point. They're getting closer to achieving that now.
So and this kind of is a premonition of what will come to us when we go from preliminary to final. This is kind of leading us down that path. If an applicant came in with lots at grade, and then they came in with a final, under preliminary, and they came with a final with an 8-foot retaining wall, is that substantial compliance?
Well, what we look at is what was approved in terms of the padded locations, and then integrating as we get to the final development plan, we look to see if that's a major difference, and ultimately we evaluate all of the facts that we have. And at the time, I don't know that they had all of the facts that there was going to be an 8-foot retaining wall.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Other questions for staff before we go to the public
hearing? One other, if I could just follow up.
No comments at this point, just questions.
Right. The on the original approval along Bellardo, it shows quite a bit of landscaping. Will that landscaping be removed, or is that being retained?
So they would still have landscaping along Bellardo. I don't know the specific dimension, but they would have to provide street front landscape. And we would look for that as a part of the final development plan.
Great, thank you very much.
Are we through with questions of staff? Great. Is the applicant for the extension here? If you would come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Janish. I'm with Toll Brothers, and this is Sky Smith. He's with MSA Engineering. And David gave you a really good scenario of what Toll Brothers is trying to accomplish. One is, of course, the PD extension and the tentative track map extension, but also just to let everyone know that Toll Brothers would also want to come in also with the engineering plans to raise the site, eliminate the paseos, and reroute the storm drain. And so just to kind of, is the microphone on? Maybe I'm not talking close enough. I'm sorry. Okay, so the first item would be the, I know you'd mentioned in regards to the paseos and the lawsuit, and I have seen it because the sellers, they did show it to us, and part of it was to, that the paseos could be eliminated. So that was one of the main reasons was to eliminate those paseos, was to give the deeper backyards to minimize when you're walking in those, between those paseos, you're going to be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet higher than your neighbor's house. So you're going to be looking down to the south onto the neighbor's house. So that was just not a very good privacy issue. And then with the, there are homeless out there, I know you're aware of, and one of the conditions also is to not have any access control gates. So you're going to have more people walking through the community, walking down those paseos and disrupting the residents that live there. This way, you know, with the sidewalks going through the community, anybody walking through the community would have to be in the front walking on the sidewalks. So that was one of our main objectives, was to, for privacy, deeper lots for more enjoyable rear yards, instead of the 5-foot condition right now in the rear yards is a really, really small home site to have anything going on in your backyard. Bellardo, there's another, I know several questions, and I believe the previous applicant never, the design was to have 8-foot walls, which is just not practical, to have an 8-foot wall along Bellardo. Our goal is to raise the pad elevations, to eliminate the really high retaining walls, to still give the your views actually on those homes facing the west, to the West Mountains. You're going to have a much better view than being kind of in a hole, per se, on the elevation themselves. And one of the reasons also was to reroute the storm drain that right now has it coming down Bellardo to Mesquite, across Palm Canyon, down Mesquite to Random Road into Tockwoods Creek. Our objective is to, we put the common area, and there's actually, I know that several people have mentioned there's 57 home sites. There's actually 56 home sites, so we've not changed the amount of home sites. There's 56 home sites and 25 condos. So what we've done is we've moved up the streets to the north and put a common area on 56, so we could take the storm drain from the West Mountains and flow through our site instead of going all the way around down, you know, like I said, all those streets prior. So our main objective was basically a lot less maintenance costs to maintain the storm drains, a lot less tearing up the streets. There's, you know, all those brand new streets on Bellardo, Mesquite, they'd all have to be torn up. There's a 42-inch storm drain line that there's proposed down on Random Road. Our objective is to not do that. We want to rather go through our existing site, and we work with Riverside County Flood Control to get the drainage proper, and work with MSA to get the hydrology reports, and staff and public works engineering. So we would also work with the, talk about Bellardo, the street elevations. Then our goal today is to have the PD and tentative extensions, but also, like I mentioned, is to basically give thought of the revisions that we are going to present. I know that there's some differences from what was originally proposed, but we still believe we are in substantial conformance and an overall better, much better layout. And Sky, if you had anything to add what I had.
The site layout with the grading design that we're coming up with, product for this site.
Speaking to the mic.
Sorry. The previous layout.
And would you identify yourself?
Sky Smith with MSA Consulting. the previous layout on Bellardo, we talked about 8-foot retaining walls, but you also got a 6-foot wall on top of that. So now you got a 14-foot wall in your backyard, which is, nobody wants to look at that. So we kind of alleviated those tall walls on Bellardo by transitioning that retaining portion along the south edge and putting that where Alan pointed out the common area for the storm drain that runs through. So that'll help. It'll just help balance the site out better and make it more practical.
I did have one more comment that you had mentioned also along Tockwoods Creek is the buffer is we don't plan on using the back of the homes as the rear wall. We don't want to have, because we'd mentioned, there are homeless. We don't want our residents to have people walking right up to the back of their homes where they can actually physically look in a window. We do plan on building along Tockwoods Creek. We will work with Riverside County Flood Control and landscape that area in there to create that buffer. I know that there's a trail and landscaping that's proposed, and we don't intend not to do that. We just plan on putting a wall so that our residents have privacy in their own rear yards instead of what was proposed previously where you could walk up to anybody's master bedroom window and look right in without having a wall. So our main thing was privacy, elevations, and storm drain. Just to also note, when we do raise the elevation, we're doing our best to maintain the elevation along the 5 plexes, the 25 condos on South Palm Canyon, because I know that would be, we don't want to go any, I think we're within, 1.2, at max 1 foot. We're trying to stay within 1 foot of elevation along South Palm Canyon, so that way we don't disrupt the previously approved elevations along Palm Canyon.
I'm going to open this up to public comment, but stay here because we'll want you back.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
Don't go far. Are there any members of the public who'd like to testify on this? Seeing none, we'll go right into rebuttal, and if you don't have a rebuttal for that extensive public comment, I'd open this up to questions from the commission. Commissioner Calverdine?
So I guess today we're being just asked to give our initial thoughts to the revisions, and one thing I would really like to request when it comes back that we get a better description of where the drains are changing. I have a hard time following it from just the text, and I don't see in all of this. Now we got some new stuff today, and I haven't been able to evaluate that. But I really would like to see what the effect of moving the storm drain is. I'm not asking you to describe it too much today, but I think when we come back, that's going to be an issue. Any changes to the buffer of the bike trail, get a better description of what's going along the Tockwoods Creek Trail. I think that's going to be a highlight of the commission's thoughts. And then, again, the Paseos and what's happening to them. I think that's pretty easy, I guess, to understand. But what sort of backyards are those folks getting back with the elimination of the Paseos?
They're actually getting a backyard.
Okay, well, that's one thing we'll want to maybe get a better description of, how many feet and that sort of thing. But we don't need it all. Okay. I'm not asking for that detail today. I'm just saying it'd be good to have that with the final plan.
Going from Commissioner Donenfeld down.
I just want to make sure, again, I don't want to harp on the significant change aspect, but it is a finding that we have to be comfortable with. So you have a combination of changes. Some of the changes are pursuant to the court decree that you're making, and that was the elimination basically of the Paseos and the retaining wall. Was that a court decree item or something you decided on your own with respect to lowering the retaining walls?
It was something we've decided on our own. It's to lower the retaining walls, but then to actually gain more privacy.
And bring everything up.
Yes, that was never.
And elevating the pads is your decision, not a court decree mandate.
That is correct.
Drainage is your decision, not a court decree mandate.
That is correct.
What else has been your decision? Well, I guess putting a wall along Tockwoods River Trail was also your design decision,
correct,
not mandated by the court. So it sounds like the court decree really didn't change a lot.
The court decree didn't change anything. The court decree actually stated that the Paseos could stay, but they would not do, they would be fine if they were removed also.
So what was the, I don't, well, litigation's crazy. I guess it's not really relevant. Okay, so I just want to understand what the changes are that we're talking about vis-a-vis the court decree and your own developer design changes that you're planning on discussing tonight.
Donenfeld, it was also moving lots, space 1 and 15.
Moving.
So that you created a different pool area.
Right.
Is that part of the settlement?
No, that was just,
That's
that
a
was one
design
of their
change.
proposed changes, was to separate the pool and the dog park area a little bit.
Lot 15 on our new plan, and I believe on the existing would have been, yeah, lot 15. So we just moved it up. But if you notice how close it is on the existing compared to instead of having it right up against the street where the setback, it looked pretty minimal. We've created, a separate pool area and a separate dog park instead of having them side by side. We now have them, running along the side there, I should say, to give it more of a, open feel on that corner.
And with respect to the condominium retail complex along Palm Canyon, you're proposing no changes to that configuration?
Right, but there's no retail.
I'm sorry, just the line of condos along you're proposing no changes to the condominiums?
The only thing is just, the elevation to make the grades work for the storm drain line.
So the whole site is being elevated?
Correct.
By how many feet?
3 to 4 feet.
Along Palm Canyon?
No, not along Palm Canyon.
No, that would mean, is it a slow grade up?
Yes.
From Palm Canyon?
From Palm Canyon, yes. Because right now the way it's configured is it's a large step design. There's, anywhere from back of lot 7, 8, there's like a 6-foot height difference between 8 and lot 7. Our goal is to make that, soften it to like 2 foot max to 3 foot instead of the large retaining walls they have here. Because then you're doing double walls, which would eliminate then more yard space for our residents. So our goal is to make it more private and more open for the rear yards.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions for Commissioner Hirschbein?
Quick, and it's so to clarify on the buffer at Tahquitz Creek, there's going to be a back wall to the residence. And then how big is the buffer that's still within your property?
Right now, it's 5 is what we're showing.
5 what?
5 feet.
But the proposal is to grade from that.
To do what? I'm sorry?
To grade from that buffer property line down to the existing trail along Tahquitz Creek and then landscape that area.
Right, but within your property, you're proposing a 5-foot buffer.
5-foot buffer, yes.
And would you be, is there going to be an HOA that's responsible for maintaining that then?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's common area on your property.
It would be common, if it's common area, that's correct. It would be, yes.
Okay, so it's being reduced from whatever it was before to 5 feet, that's what?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Marucci, questions? Commissioner Woods?
Thank you. I just need some clarification. I'm looking at 2 of the exhibits that were handed out to us at the meeting here. One of them I think is right up here before us, and the other one is called the wall exhibit. The wall exhibit shows, where my confusion comes in, Belardo having an 8-foot retaining wall, and this exhibit shows something quite different. It shows the retaining wall being much shorter. I'm not talking about the privacy wall on top of the retaining wall, just the retaining wall. Can you explain the difference?
The difference is we just kind of did a study based on the original tentative map elevations, and that's the one that says high-tech TTM wall exhibit. And so that's showing roughly along like Belardo there that some of those pads were 8 feet below the street. So you're going to have an 8-foot retaining wall.
On the private property side.
Correct. And then so what we did on the other exhibit is that's our revised design, and that's eliminating, most of that blue line was our goal. Actually, we got rid of all of it. So right now, the biggest difference we have is within 4 feet.
And that would be above grade versus below grade at that point?
That's still below grade, below Bellardo.
It's still below Bellardo, not
Correct.
above Bellardo?
Correct.
I see, okay. So it's all suppressed from Bellardo?
Correct.
Not raised 8 feet plus an
I believe
additional 6 feet?
there's like 3 lots. The first 2 lots, 48 and 49, would be about at Bellardo or just a little above. And then they kind of start transitioning down from there.
So along Bellardo, what would be the largest retaining wall, not the privacy wall, the retaining wall?
4 feet.
4 feet, and then on top of that, you could get another 6-foot
Right.
wall
Well,
for
we
the
talked
backyard.
about 5 if for pool.
Okay, and you explained, and I think I heard you say that you were unwilling to step it back into 2 separate walls, which gives a bit of a relief?
Trying to eliminate that as much as possible, but
And that would be just to give more yard area to the
Right.
private residence
Exactly.
on that versus a tall, because you would have a wall that would be 4 feet plus 5 feet, or up to 6, which is a 10-foot wall along Bellardo where none existed in the preliminary. Thanks. The other question I had is on the drainage, and I'm not sure I understood everything completely, and I apologize for that, but it seems in listening to you, there's a substantial cost savings in the way that you're going versus what was approved with the preliminary. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, for cost savings and maintenance savings.
Right. And in that, cost savings and that maintenance savings, and because we've lost to the Paseos, has there been any thought about offering up another public benefit?
No, well, the public benefit would be the sidewalks, the enhanced sidewalks going around the community to, enhance just the overall look when you drive in with the paver sidewalks and the paver entrance.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have some questions at this point. It concerns, we did a major architectural on this that went to council in terms of what the condos would look like from the street and what the houses would look like from the street. I know that Toll has a lot, very familiar with you, and you have some of your own design styles. Are you comfortable, or do we expect that you will come back with any design changes in what the design facades of the houses were that were approved in concept?
Well, our goal is to, we will be coming back, to answer your question, with some new floor plans. We're going to try to replicate as best we can. I'm thinking we're going to come back with better than what is currently approved as far as the single-family residentials, because we didn't really care for the layout of the floor plans that's approved. The 5-plexes, I've been in communication with the original architect, and so we haven't really talked about change. I actually, personally, I like the 5-plexes, the condos along South Palm Canyon. So those we've not talked about changing. It's the single-family residentials. As far as the floor plans will change, because we've got some plans that'll make a little shorter to give a bigger backyard, because right now, like I said, they've got 5-foot backyards, and everything was courtyard designs. And one thing that we're also doing that I know David mentioned was what's called our benefit and burden easement, because you got a 7-foot and 3-foot side yard. My goal would be 5-foot and 5-foot, but I know speaking to planning, that was probably a little bit of a reach. But what our goal is to have the use easement where you give up 3 feet to gain 3 feet, so you have a 10-foot usable side yard instead of what is now currently. No, it's not a zero lot line. It's a use easement.
Mm-hmm.
And so the
It's
lot
a
lines,
shared use easement.
It's a shared use easement, thank you. And so the benefit of that is you're going to gain another 3 feet, and then we're also going to be eliminating all the retaining walls that would go down the property line, so that way we have more of an open feel community instead of all these walls and step downs and retaining walls.
And
So
similar to what you did at Ascena?
it was exactly what we did at Ascena.
I think those are my questions. Are there more questions of the applicant?
This could be answered when we come back and review the final PD, but if you're going to raise the houses along Bellardo, implies that that height increase is going to have to get stepped down through the whole development, or is it going to be through the street, or where's that going to taper off into the?
Yeah, the whole, because we're raising Bellardo, everything's transitioned down through the site, through the streets, through the homes.
So everything's going to be a little bit higher, and you'll
Yeah.
be importing some fill then to.
Yes, the importing of the dirt will also help for just not having to deal with all the rock that's out here when they go for over-Xing and all that good stuff.
Okay, cover the rocks.
Exactly right.
We've experienced some projects that have had car-sized boulders that they've had to get rid of.
You realize there's a condition on this regarding rock crushing on site that you have to demonstrate it can be done without
correct.
danger.
That's correct. We have talked to a rock crusher, and he's aware that, you know, he has to demonstrate. But with raising the elevation, like you had mentioned, we would be filling in a lot of those, because right now you'd have to over-X 5 feet and pull all those rocks out and crush all those. Our goal is to over-X, 1 to 2 feet and fill it in as best we can to eliminate rock crushing. We'd have import, but that's less noisy than the rock crushing and hauling the large-sized boulders off. Like,
I'm sure you'll be able to demonstrate that you're not going to have any differential settlement with that case, right?
I'm sorry?
You'll be able to demonstrate that there's no differential settlement if part of your house is over a rock and part of it's not.
Yeah.
That'll be a concern, but.
I think those are all of our questions for you. Thank you. It's before the commission.
Madam Chair, as you begin your deliberations, because there has been much discussion about aspects of the site plan and proposed changes, I just want to make sure that as you are deliberating on this item, you're deliberating on the extension of time of the applications, and you're looking specifically at the criteria on pages 5 through 7 of your staff report.
We plan to do that. I plan to take this in 2 segments without a vote.
Okay.
So I plan to first talk about the extension, and then I plan to give comments back to Toll Brothers regarding the items that they've mentioned to us, so they have a sense of what the Planning Commission would look at when this came back to us.
I just want to make sure that we preserve the record on your action relative to the extension
We
of time.
will make sure we preserve the action regarding the extension, and we'll take that separately. And when we take a vote, it will be a vote on the extension as opposed, but I do want to give comments back, but I want, so the first comments are on the extension. The only question that's, I think, before us on the extension are the modifications that they're looking at. Is it significant? Is it the same project? Pardon?
I don't know how we answer that since they're not really before us.
Well, the same project is before us, but we're also looking at things that they intend to change, so we know, we have some sense that for Toll to take it over, they would have to make these changes to the site plan.
We'd have to approve that with the final PDD.
We'd have to approve it with the final PDD, but we're extending a project. It would be unfair to them if we thought those changes were so significant that we wouldn't be able to approve it. I think that's the case. We want to give them an idea now that this is approvable and to extend, right?
Again, we need to separate those two actions.
Right.
That any changes will be deliberated under the final plan development district, which will come before you. That's only approving if you approve the extension. If you don't, then the question is moot. But again, on the extension of time, you are looking at the site plan that was approved by City Council, and there are no changes to that site plan. And that would be the basis of the criterion that you're looking at relative to the extension of time.
Comments? Commissioner Woods?
Thank you. I think it's always difficult because an applicant, the merchant builder, as well as the land developers, invested a large amount of time and effort into making this happen. I also understand that there's been a lot of contention over PDDs in general, of which this was approved by in general. It's, and I wasn't involved in the original approval of this process either. So at this point, I am still weighing my options on the extension of time on this or not the extension of time on this. If somebody had no retaining walls and they came in with a wall that was 10 foot tall, I would personally not vote that that was substantial compliance.
Since I wasn't here during the deliberations, I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners who were, as relates to the time extension, before I make a decision.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yes, I am going to oppose a time extension not having to do with the proposed changes to the site plan or the architecture. To me, it's less relevant than what the time extensions were meant to accommodate in the first place. And it seems to me we've been talking about time extensions for quite a while, and that we, at least in my thinking, is that time extensions should be limited. We should not approve them without substantial reasons, and the reasons that we would approve a time extension, in my opinion, would have to do with events that are out of the control of the person or the company asking for the time extension. And those things would be things like lawsuits or things like at Serena Park, I believe there was a time extension having to do with some of the condo HOAs having to agree on an access road, things that are substantial, or in the case of the Hacienda Hotel, there was some Indian land that needed an extension on the lease, things that are substantially outside the control of the applicant. The reasons cited for the time extension in this case are wholly within what is in control of the people that originally got the approval. So I think another 1 year on this is the wrong thing to do. I think that given that there's been a substantial amount of time already, they could have moved forward with many of the documents needed to proceed, and therefore I'm going to oppose it.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe, apropos of what Commissioner Hirschbein just said, there was an intervening event that was beyond the control of either the original applicant or the new applicant. That is, there was a lawsuit.
Yeah, but it was extended by that length.
But the lawsuit still made some significant changes based on the court decree, which they had no control over. I'm wrestling with whether these changes, my issue is whether the changes are significant or not. And I finally concluded that if you look at the basic overall plan, the site plan itself, it's pretty much the way we approved it. And so I would come down on saying that the changes are not significant enough to deny the extension, and I would vote in favor of extending the PDD for another year. And the track map is, tentative track map as well.
Commissioner Calhoun.
We're kind of in a funny position here because we're actually not extending it with these changes. We're actually extending the old plan so that we can consider changes to the old plan. Is that right? Right. We know that if we didn't extend it, the project is dead because there's not enough time to actually get to the point of having building permits or whatever it would take to do to get the project in place. So you would be killing the project. But we went through a lot of time And we reviewed this extensively. The council even made more changes than, well, some additional changes to what we had done. And I still think it's going to be a good project. Evidently, they have worked out some of the issues with, I'm not sure who the lawsuit people were, but in this case, but those have been resolved, but those all take time. And I think in this case, the one-year extension is certainly merited, but particularly with the change of ownership, that also changes what can be done, and the new owners want to come in and make it a better project, which is hard to argue against. So I'm going to be supporting the extension. We have lots. We're finding out that our current times are not really working. By the way, almost every major project requires an extension just to get through our process because issues come up in final design that take time to resolve. With that, I'm done.
There are two things that I would say about this. I'd say that there were intervening circumstances, and it's both the loss of one merchant builder or one potential buyer who took this through and then having a new one come in. That's substantial, and the lawsuit's substantial. So I think they've continued, we have seen continued work on this. So I'm going to vote in favor of the extension. I will have a few comments on the proposals that they have in front of us in terms of guidance and what we think on those issues. But to me, it's really the same plan that the council approved. I also think that as I look at it, this area does need to get developed. We have a project that's unfortunately vested across the street that's been sitting there for 10 years and a vacant parcel next to it. I think it would be good to see something work in that particular area, and I think this is probably as good a plan as we will get there. So I'm in favor of the extension. Commissioner Maruzzi.
Do we, as a commission, feel that, as Commissioner Caledine expressed, if we deny the extension, we're essentially denying?
Oh, the project's dead if we if we deny this. There's been work done on this. There's been environmental work. There's been drawings. There's been a range of things done, and it will end.
I think isn't the date January of next year?
Right, and this is a normal extension. This is, we're not doing, Flynn, I'm correct that this isn't extraordinary, that we are able to do a one-year extension on a PD and a...
Yes, you have the option of either doing a one-year extension or you may do a two-year extension.
Right, and I think, so we've been asked for a one-year extension on this. We're not moving outside of the range of the limitation on extensions that we gave. So at this point, we are 3-1, and on this issue, I'd like to hear from both of you, going to Commissioner Maruzzi first.
Generally, I don't agree with extensions, time extensions, but given the experience of the commissioners who have been here a while and have dealt with this issue, and I will support the extension.
Commissioner Woods?
I know extensions have been contentious. I don't think this extension is the extensions that this commission has seen in the past. This is a much shorter time frame. It's not like it's been 10 years. I think, indeed, they have demonstrated through the staff report a very goodwill effort to keep the project moving forward. I do have some comments as well, so they'd come back with the final that looks better, but I would support the extension for 1 year.
So we do want to make comments and suggestions on this. Flynn, do you think we need to take a vote on this, or can I hold this to our comments as well?
Madam Chair, our suggestion would be, because the extensions are the operative motion before the commission, that you take a vote on that, and then after that is completed, if you want to offer suggestions for the project, you can do that.
Okay. So I'll call the question at this point in time. We're not getting a screen, nor can we vote. The motion is made by Commissioner Donenfeld.
I'll make the motion.
Can I get a new commissioner to make a second?
Just get my name in the paper.
Most certainly, as prompted, I will make the second.
Thank you. It is still not letting us vote. Can we do a voice vote, or?
We can do a verbal vote on this.
A roll call.
So I have a motion by
Donenfeld.
Commissioner Donenfeld, and seconded by Commissioner Woods.
Okay, Commissioner Donenfeld?
Yes.
Hirschbein?
No.
Hudson's absent. Maruzzi?
Yes.
Woods?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kellerdyne?
Yes.
And Chair Wermick?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now a discussion on the items that they brought forward to us in terms of the changes they had proposed making and what we would feel about them when they came back. Maybe we can start with Commissioner Woods and come back this way.
I think I've expressed it once, and I'll just express it again. Along a public right-of-way, I personally do not think something is in substantial compliance if a 10-foot wall is allowed or larger. I think there are ways, if it is absolutely necessary, to mitigate it, because it is in the public realm to look at every day. I think it walls in a street. I also, in the questioning of Commissioner Hirschman, I would agree that the trail system along should be robust, complete with what the original thought was, as well as the landscape along Belardo. Thank you.
I'd like to hear more in the future about the Belardo side, and whether I want to see some 3D representations of what these raised pads will look like and how the views will be if you're on Belardo looking east. Because I've been disappointed by other projects that I've seen recently in the area where they're on enormous pads that seem out of place and inappropriate. So I'd like to see how that's actually going to look with some sort of 3D views.
I agree with both those comments.
I also agree with the comments. I'm concerned about raising the pads too high. We were concerned about that before, and I know Mr. Hirschman talked about the AZ's concern about the views. I agree with Mr. Woods. We have to rethink the walls. There must be a more creative way to do the retaining wall. And I would like to see more detail on the drainage because I don't really understand it. I think adding more backyard space on the northern side part of the site is very desirable, and obviously the sidewalks are going to be a benefit to the community.
I agree with all of the comments so far. I think a grading plan that we review has to be part of any changes that we see. We've got a pretty good sense of that. I liked some of the changes that came in. I thought eliminating the paseos was actually very good because of the area it's in and that the project is open. I would be not comfortable with changes to the architecture along Palm Canyon. I think a lot of work was done on that, a lot of thought was done on that, and that's a facade that we all really liked. So I think I would like to see that retained. And I just loved your moving the 2 lots to make the dog park and the pool separate. I thought that really added to the project. I agree with the comments about the north side and going down to the Chocowitz Creek. I think the original plan on that was better in terms of the preservation of the creek. So that's the one area that you raised that I was really cautious about. I thought a lot of thought had gone into that in terms of a public amenity, and I didn't just want to see it changed for bigger backyards for the residents. So those are my comments, and I think that.
I want to agree with what everyone has said. We really want to make sure that we understand the grading here. We probably should understand where the dirt is coming from to be, this sounds like it'd be a pretty substantial amount of borrow. One of my most important factors that I want to make sure isn't adversely affected with any changes to the north side is the undercrossing of Palm Canyon Drive for the trail. That is a critical public facility from my point of view, and we want to make sure that any new drain outfalls or landscaping plans or anything like that doesn't make that a problem. That to me is one of the key benefits of this project, is to be able to get that undercrossing in there. Again, the Bellardo is a big issue. And then the lot-to-lot elevation changes, I don't understand the way that was. Maybe I didn't understand it before, but now that it's been pointed out, I don't understand it even more. So I want to see how that works, what the relative elevations of the adjacent lots are. I think that's enough. Again.
Mm-hmm. And this goes to Commissioner Wood's earlier question about the elimination of the paseos and rethinking the public benefit. I'd like to see when you come back. I'm not for the paseos. I don't think that they were any really great shakes, to be honest with you. And I'm happy to see them go. But I would like to see another hard look at the public benefit. I think the project itself doesn't qualify as a public benefit. The public benefit has to be something the public can enjoy. It's a housing development. It's not open to the public. I mean, the streets are, but...
We probably can't change what the council determined as public benefit. I think am I correct in that? That was a council decision. They changed what we said?
Yes. Before you today is the extension, the actual merits of the project at the PDD were...
No, we understand that. We've already voted on the extension. Right. We're merely talking about when this comes back with changes, and I was asking Flynn that question, not you. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
And that means I have a follow-up question.
What we will do is we will evaluate the public benefit when the final PDD comes back to you. One of the things to take into consideration is City Council didn't just qualify the project as the public benefit. There were other amenities that are listed there in the approving resolution that satisfied public benefit. And we can go through that as we review the final PDD.
No, I understand that, but my point is that they're eliminating one of the public benefits listed, the paseos. I'm not against them eliminating that public benefit, but I think there should be a compensating public benefit to make up for that loss of a public benefit as it was approved by the council.
Yes, and that's certainly something you can do as part of the final PDD and looking at any minor changes to the plan.
Madam Chair?
So I think are we done?
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Come up with the previous discussion. On the public benefit at the PDD committee, we're looking at some other related issues to public benefit. And I know, I just want to make sure that when it comes back.
That's out of, we'll have gone through that before this comes back to us.
Yes, you'll be discussing that on October 3rd.
Make sure it's consistent with that.
We know that it will have to be. Flynn, do you want to read those back to us, and then just to make sure what I'd like this to be is a sense of the whole commission.
Okay, so going through the comments as they were given, Commissioner Woods wanted to see a solution to the retaining walls, that there not be any 10-foot high retaining walls. Also requested that there be rather robust landscaping and buffers along the trail going back to the original approval. Commissioner Marucci wanted to see the additional details of the grading at Bellardo and their plans for raising the pads, and wanted 3D views of what that would look like across the site. Commissioner Hirschbein does not support the retaining the paseos and wants to look at, if those are eliminated, what the public benefit would be to replace those. Commissioner Donenfeld expressed concern about raising the pads too high, again, going back to the grading issue, and also reiterated the concerns that Commissioner Woods had about the retaining walls, wanted to look at the proposed changes to the drainage and how that might impact the site and gain an understanding of what that would mean relative to the approved development. Indicated that additional space in the rear yards was desirable, but wanted to make sure that we retain the landscape buffer along the trail. Chair Wormuck also discussed the grading plan that needs to be submitted with pad heights on that when the final PD comes back. Did not want to see any changes to the approved architecture of the multifamily buildings along South Palm Canyon, supports the changes that are proposed relative to the dog park and the pool, agrees with the comments about the landscape buffer and landscaping along the north side and trail, go back to the original plan. Commissioner Callardine wanted to have information relative to how the fill dirt is being brought into the site, where that would be coming from, how that would occur. Also indicated, if I got this correctly, that the trailhead at South Palm Canyon is critical.
Trail undercrossing.
Trail undercrossing at South Palm Canyon is critical, and the drainage changes should not impact that undercrossing. Also wants to look, as the other commissioners did, at the grading along Bellardo and the lot-to-lot differential within the site itself. So that's the list of comments and concerns that I have.
Just a sense from the commission that we all share these concerns, that this compilation is from all of us.
I would agree. I would just say that I was my concern was just overall wall height, not just retaining wall.
I have one last comment on it, which is just, I think Toll it's part of why I supported the extension. We've had a really, really good experience with Toll at Ascena in terms of how happy homeowners are with their product and how nice it looks. And I'm very hopeful about them moving forward on this project. Moving right along. What time is it?
Take a break.
I want to get out of here. I don't know about anybody else. We have the last extension, and I have to leave somewhere around 5 o'clock, so I don't want to break. The last item is Palm Springs Country Club LLC for a time extension for the entitlements and review of the development agreement of Serena Park, a residential development consisting of 386 attached and detached residential units, open space streets, park space on 126 acres of land previously operated as a golf course, generally located east of Sunrise Way, north of Verona Road, and southwest of the Whitewater River. Staff report, please.
Yes, Chair Wehrmack and Commissioners. So the two items before you today are an extension of time for the entitlements on the project, as well as a review of the revised development agreement that was approved by Council. So the first item is the extension of time. The applicant is seeking a one-year extension of time from September 7th of this year to September 7th of next year for all of the entitlements. Your decision today the recommendation is approval of the PD and major architectural applications, as well as a recommendation to the council on the tentative track map of approval. The applicant has made efforts to exercise these entitlements. Namely, they've been working with staff as it relates to the revision of the tentative track map and the development agreement for the project. When the project was approved in September of 2016, there were revisions to the site plan that necessitated an updated tentative track map. The applicant submitted the revised tentative map in October of last year, worked with staff on making some changes to the plan in order to ensure it was in compliance with the council's approval. And the revised plan then, now that it conforms to the council's approval, is consistent with that action. And so that map now has been brought up to conformance. So there are conditions that we are recommending as a part of your draft resolution. You received that today as a part of your supplemental materials. But there is a revision to the table that was previously approved as a part of the project that had listed the lot numbers associated with the development standards. That table is based on the table that you see in the map that was revised earlier this year. So those standards are consistent with the lot layout as revised per the tentative map. So that's one item. The other item has been the development agreement, which the applicant has been working with staff in order to execute that document. The time extension would effectively allow staff to work with the applicant and finalize the development agreement in order to exercise that document and execute it. With the execution of the document, that would essentially become the effective document and time frame for the project, as it does define the terms for the development. And as you'll see as a part of your attachments, we've revised the timeline exhibit attached to that document. So that shows the new timeline for the project in terms of meeting deadlines and executing the development. There was also some challenges with respect to the note of the project and having the development agreement signed, and that was a delay on the project. So we think with what we have before you, the revision attached to your report, this would allow the applicant to secure funding for the project and also meet the intent of what the council decided when they approved the development agreement. So those are the two items that you are considering today. You did receive 3 items of correspondence from the public, one of which was in your report. The other 2 were provided as supplemental materials today. And then, as I said, there are 2 resolutions for your consideration this evening. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is here along with their counsel to provide additional clarification on any information.
Just in the interest of speeding this up a little bit, the correspondence we received was regarding changing the entitlements that were granted. Those aren't before us today. So what's before us today? And can you, how long did it take to get the street changed? That was a very big issue, wasn't it?
Street change, you're talking about Golden Sands?
Yeah, Golden Sands.
Yeah, so that would be a part of the final map, and that's been, the developer has been negotiating that with the HOA. So I'm not certain as to the specific timelines that they've done, but maybe they can clarify that.
And the other major issue is the development agreement, and Marcus is here, and I'm just going to ask if he can explain to us. I sat in on city council when this came before council, and the issue was there had been an agreement with $3 million. Council had agreed for it to be postponed for up to 3 years. Council wanted a security agreement, some kind of note if it wasn't paid at the end of 3 years. The developer didn't want to do that. What progress have you made on that issue, Marcus?
That is a good summary of why we're here today. So we've met. There was a city council ad hoc subcommittee formed to meet on this issue with the developer. And basically the revisions that are proposed for your consideration would help resolve the impasse that we've been at related to basically providing a security instrument to secure this $3 million payment.
Can you explain the revisions? Just give them, encapsulate them for
Sure.
us.
Basically, it eliminates the need to furnish an actual note to secure the $3 million payment. And the thing to consider is the fact that the development agreement itself is security. So we've clarified that the $3 million payment remains due and payable within 3 years of its effective date of the development agreement. And if any or all of that payment hasn't been made, that constitutes a default. It always would, but this is just clarifying the fact that this constitutes a default, and then the city has all the remedies available to it as allowed by law under the development agreement. And Mark Allen, the attorney representing the developer, can get into that more detail. But essentially, we had to come to this agreement to revise the development agreement in order for the developer to move forward with the project. And he can go into the details of the complications the security instrument represented to them in getting the financing that they'll need to move forward with, proceeding with final design of the project and construction.
And to speed this up, can we just go directly to public hearing? Will you guys agree to that?
Well,
We're at 5 o'clock.
That change that you just mentioned, has that subcommittee approved that change to the development agreement?
That's why it's here today.
No,
yes,
I
the
understood
subcommittee
that
has seen this revision, and now it's going to you through the formal process, through the development agreement review and as a revision to the development agreement.
And then it goes to council.
Correct.
Is that, can I just confirm that? Because I talked to one of the subcommittee members, and they weren't clear on that it had gone back to them.
We had a meeting, yes, we had a meeting with the council subcommittee on this item.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. If the developer is here, you have 10 minutes. If you're not making a presentation, is there anyone here to speak? And then we'll call you up for questions. If there's anyone who wants to speak in the public hearing on the project, please come forward. Please come forward if you wish to speak. We have your letter. Thank you. Okay, there being no speakers, we will call the applicant up for questions. And the public hearing is still open for questions from us to them.
Mark Allen, I'm the attorney for the applicant, and with me is
Nicole Van with MSA Consulting.
Are there other? Commissioner Donovan.
I have a question. One of the findings we have to make for the extension is that the applicant has demonstrated convincingly and clearly that the project will be substantially underway within the extended period. Although you've requested a 2-year extension, our staff is recommending a 1-year extension. If we were to grant the 1-year extension, where would we be a year from now?
well, we hope we'll be substantially under construction.
That would be my question.
I mean, the thing that's held this up is, as you already mentioned, negotiating with the homeowners association, which is hasn't quite been finalized, is my understanding, but yeah. So I think we're good on that. Negotiating with the city, and then dealing with, as was already mentioned, that we had to since the entitlements were changed at the city council, we had to then go back and do a new track map. So all of those processes have taken place. And Nicole can talk a little bit more about what actual physical things have been done. If you'd like
Are you
some more
aware that you haven't gone through the design process, that when it came through us, we deferred any design, and you've got design review and major architectural as well to go through?
Yes, that's correct. We're aware.
So notwithstanding those hoops, you can say to us today that within the year, construction will have begun on the project?
Well, we will be disappointed if we can't do that.
They have 6 months after.
I mean, keep in mind, the first things that we're going to have to do are things like grading.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so we're a ways away from actually getting to where we're actually going to be building houses.
No, I understand.
The big thing is infrastructure.
But project includes grading and infrastructure and all of that stuff as well.
Yeah, so when we talk about, when we as developers or lawyers for developers talk about being under construction, we're talking about doing grading. That
I understand. I understand. I don't expect you'll have a house up by a year from now.
Could you please clarify where we stand on this, the Golden Sands? Has the Homeowners Association given all of its necessary approvals, or where does that particular issue sit?
My understanding is that we have all of the necessary approvals at this point.
If you could come up and speak into the record, that would be helpful.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jim Rush. I'm the General Manager there at Four Seasons. Yes, all the required recordable documents, okay, to dedicate Golden Sands to the city have been turned over to City Engineering, and that has been done probably 5-6 months ago.
You had your vote?
Oh, yes, that was done on May 17th of last year.
Okay.
Yeah, and approved by the homeowners.
Okay.
Overwhelmingly.
And any lawsuit, I mean, one of our comment letters references a lawsuit from somebody who's
That is
unhappy
an
with
internal,
that, but that's your issue, right?
That's an internal dispute that our attorney is well aware of.
Okay, that's not for us to...
No, that's not for you two. Yeah.
Okay, so I have no comment on... I have one other question for staff when I get there. But...
Just some questions for you on the development agreement. On the issue, that the issue that was before council and has been holding this project up in terms of executing the development agreement. Where are you on that issue?
My understanding is that it's resolved. The draft that you have before you has been approved by the owner and has been approved by the subcommittee, and now has to be approved by the council.
What Marcus said.
Okay.
That's the only outstanding issue on the development agreement?
There are no outstanding issues on the development agreement once the vote is taken.
Okay.
And we essentially have no comment on that. That's a council issue.
I was just asking.
Yeah, that was never in front of us, other than whether it's resolvable. Michael?
Who owns this project?
It's owned by an LLC with a group of private investors.
How many?
Well, it's owned by a single family and a development group.
And what?
And a development group. I actually don't know who the owners of all the development group are.
Okay. And is it their intent to do the houses themselves, or are you going to sell off parcels to merchant builders?
I don't know the answer to that. My guess is that they'll try to do whichever one makes them the most money.
I would say that's a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
They had told us before that it would be merchant builders. Yeah, came in their preliminary.
Chair Wermick, if I could just respond to Commissioner Hirschbein's question about ownership. Page 2 of the June 20th council report defines the principles on at the top of the page.
You understand that's not the same as the
Palm Springs Country Club LLC?
Yeah, Palm Springs Country Club LLC.
Palm Springs Country Club is the owner, but I think his question was the officers or?
Well, what they're asking is, what is the entire membership of the ownership?
No.
I don't actually know the answer.
I think in future documents, transparency agreement because the city requires it. So that'll be something we'll need to see. Yeah.
Maybe you guys have the answer. I think, what's the third access point? Is that, what's the street there that?
Francis.
What's it?
Francis.
Francis, is that a full access or just emergency?
That's emergency only.
So we only have 2 accesses.
We can't, that,
I know,
that's
I know,
that's
I know,
out
I
of
know, I
order.
know, I know,
It's out of order. It is. It was previously decided and decided by
ask
council.
what the status is.
I think the question before us, thank you. The question
Do you have any
before,
further questions?
no.
I do.
Oh, Commissioner Woods, sorry.
I think you were in the audience when a resident got up and spoke about kind of the current conditions that are out there. Could you address that?
You know, the applicant has made a lot of efforts to work with the community to clean up the site, and hearing today, I understand that the site needs to be cleaned up. There is weekly, or might be bi-weekly or monthly, actually, someone that goes out and does pick up the site, but dumping continues to happen. The applicant is aware of that. Every time he cleans it up, more trash gets dumped. So it's an ongoing problem that he is still, you know, trying to work on. But I will report, you know, I'll let him know that there are still some issues with the site, and he's been more than willing to work with, you know, the city and the neighbors to, you know, do his share and keep up the property.
I appreciate that because, you know, this is just the beginning of grading in people's backyards.
Absolutely.
And standard conditions don't always help alleviate kind of the impact that can create. So any outreach you can do at this point so people are not upset would really help us and yourselves, I think.
No, absolutely. I agree.
I don't think, can you speak to that, being with the neighboring HOA in terms of the conditions on the site, and answer that question?
Yes, we report dumping all the time, okay, to the Palm Springs LLC. And they're always quick to get out there, take care of it. We also report it just for record-keeping purposes to Palm Springs at your service. Okay, so you folks also are aware of that. But yeah, they've been working with us, you know, very well, you know, as far as cleaning anything up, because we do get a lot of tamarisk trees there and homeless sleeping in there, leaving their junk, mattresses and things like that. And when we notice it, we call them, they take care of it.
Other questions? Commissioner Donenfeld.
I'd like to make the following motion to approve a 1-year time extension for the plan development and major architectural review approvals.
We don't have major architectural.
The recommendation, I'm just reading the staff's recommendation.
We didn't approve
We didn't
major
approve.
architectural, so we don't have an extension on major architectural.
The approval that was granted involved site planning, so it was limited architectural approval. It was not the extent that you normally see.
Thank you.
So I'm reading the staff recommendation. So I move the staff recommendation number 1 and number 2, recommend city council approval of 1, a 1-year time extension of the tentative track map, and 2, a revision to the development agreement.
Second.
Call the question. Comments? Any comments?
The system's working. The second was made by.
What?
It's not working.
Oh, wait.
Commissioner Donenfeld, it's not showing that you voted. That's been approved unanimously. Thank you. I have to leave, so I'm going to turn over the remainder of this to my co-chair.
Can I undo the overrule you just did?
I have to leave too.
Sorry.
All right. Next item on the agenda, that completes our actions on that item, right? Okay, next item on the agenda is planning commission reports, right? Is there any planning commissioners' reports that need to be given? I don't see any. Then we would go to the planning director's report.
I just want to remind you all that we will have a special Planning Commission meeting on October the 3rd. That will start here in council chambers at noon instead of our regular time. We do have to be out of chambers by 4 p.m. because there is a city council meeting that night that they need to set up for. We have 4 ordinance zone text amendments on your agenda for October the 3rd. We'll be going over the golf course conversion ordinance, the transfer of development rights ordinance, the PDD ordinance, and we'll just be doing a presentation on the small lot ordinance. It's not quite ready to come forward to you in ordinance form yet. So those will be the items that we discuss on the October 3rd agenda, and again, that starts at noon here.
Will they be final or ordinances ready for our final recommendations?
Yes, all of them will be ready for your final recommendations, with the exception of the small lot, which is, this is the first time that you'll be seeing that.
Any other items on the agenda? Any other items on the planning director's report?
No, I have no other items at this time.
If not, if there's not anything, other business, I don't have the, I'll gavel the meeting closed.
So we are adjourned to October the 3rd. Thank you.